Welcome everyone to the fourth round of the Gold Coast Open, which is also doubling as the Australian Championship title decider this year. And I'll go to our pairings after round four because we have three leaders. Two of the Grandmasters, Bobby Cheng and Timur Kubakarov, and Queensland's international master, Brodie McClymont. So we're seeing seed 1 against seed 2 today. Bobby Cheng against Timur Kubakarov. These two have played each other 6 times, and the score is absolutely equal. 2 wins each and 2 draws. The most recent victory was that of Kubakarov in the Dobell Cup, but the year before that, Cheng had beaten Kubakarov also in the Dobell Cup in Canberra, Australia's biggest weekend tournament. So they are playing each other. I have a sneaking suspicion that we may not be seeing too much play. That's just judging by the opening. Cheng has a chance to force a draw. Well, I may as well show it to you before it actually happens. Let's see, where's Gold Coast gone? And Cheng against Kubakarov. The game starts as a Grunfeld defense, and there's an exchange variation, so this is all very aggressive. Takes, and now Cheng goes for an old-fashioned line, Bishop c4, c5, knight e2. This featured very often in Karpov versus Kasparov World Championship matches. Bishop e3. Now the main lines is castles. You can certainly swap first. There are Bishop g4 ideas sometimes, but instead Kubakarov played b5. And if Cheng wants to, he can now force a draw, because after b5, the tactical point after bishop takes pawn is queen check, knight c3, queen takes check, bishop here. Now you must take here, check, bishop d7, takes, and now white can either castle or play king e2, or maybe even rescue the bishop with bishop d5. Either way, we have a very equal endgame, and almost nobody's managed to win this position. So if Cheng wants to make a implicit draw offer, he will take on b5. I'll just double check. I don't know if he has taken on b5. Of course, you've got many other moves. Yeah, he's having a big think now. You've got many other moves like bishop d5 and bishop b3 and so on, but I think bishop d5 is critical. But bishop takes b5 leads by force to a drawn endgame. So we will see. And it's clear that Kubakarov up against Cheng, they're not rated so differently, is not minding a draw by playing the b5 line. If you want to play for a win, of course you just castle and game continues. But we'll see how these two go. So that is board 1. Okay, let's go back to the pairings. So board 2, Rishi Sardana from Canberra up against Brodie McClymont from Queensland. Sardana really needs a win. He's sitting half a point behind. He hasn't played any of the Grandmasters yet. He dropped an early draw to Mars Chi, and so he needs to start beating some of the international masters if he's going to have a chance. Sardana's perhaps the player with the most chance for a Grandmaster norm in this event, but really it's a long shot, because you're going to have to score 7 out of 9, and you're going to have to get your average field up to average 2380. And if you have a look, for example, at Sardana, which is just here, he has played, well, an 1852 will be able to be raised to about 2200, but his average is about 2200, a little bit over. So nothing like what he's going to need if he needs to get a norm. And even the high ratings of the Grandmasters will make it, well, will help, but it would still be very, very difficult. And of course, if you get someone like Jaden Oy, the 12-year-old from Queensland, a very talented 12-year-old who's up there playing Grandmaster Xiao Zhong Wan, that'll ruin any title norm aspirants' chances. So Jaden, up against Xiao Zhong Wan. Xiao Zhong Wan had a terrible day yesterday. The third seed drew with Aiden Brady, and before that, I think he'd drawn another one against Michael Kethrow from Canberra. That's right. So, Kethrow then went on to lose a game, I think, to Sardana. But it's not what you'd expect if you're going for the title. And again, dropping those points against weaker opponents early on means you just have to beat some of the top seeds. You can't be like Cheng and Kubakarov and decide whether you want to make a draw or not. You don't have those points to spare. The normal winning score in a Gold Coast Open is 7.5 out of 9. I think that could be a bit lower because the field is slightly smaller than usual. We've got, I believe, 36 players now. Zerui Singh is not paired for the fourth game in a row. He's ill, so my guess is he's out of the tournament. And then Adam Vag is taking a bye. This may be just a one-off, but we'll wait and see. Adam Vag, the lowest-rated player in the tournament, and also not one of the oldest. In fact, I think the oldest at 59. He maybe it's all getting a bit much for him, but we'll see. So let's go down back up to the top, brother. So Jaden Oy against Xiao Zhong Wan should be really interesting. Oy has been getting coaching from Xiao's longtime mate and rival David Smurden. But look, there should be a class difference. The rating difference is absolutely massive. Jaden's 27th seed with a FIDE rating of around 1850. It's not really so impressive. Remembering, of course, that during the pandemic, because Australian players had so many lockdowns and were unable to play a lot of tournaments. For example, this is the first Gold Coast Open since 2019. Because the other two were affected by lockdowns. So not only are the players' ratings lagging behind, but their FIDE ratings are lagging even more behind. I know one Olympiad applicant for the Australian women's team had a FIDE rating of 1300 and something, whereas her Australian rating, which was a bit more realistic, was in the 1800s. So there's this big gap opening up because so few players in Australia have been able to play FIDE rated tournaments in recent times. And you will start to get the sort of ridiculous situation you had 10 or 15 years ago when a 1900 player, FIDE 1900 player like Andrew Brown could score an international master norm because they were so much better than their FIDE rating. Of course, Andrew Brown went on to move his rating up, but still not as much as it should be. So you will find Australian FIDE ratings lagging the international rating system, especially if they're juniors. Okay, on board 4, we have Jack Piccini against another junior, Sravan Rengis. Rengis, has certainly managed to get reasonable rating. Remembering he's only 14 years old. But again, his Australian rating of 2275 is about 100 points higher than his Australian, his FIDE rating. Jack Piccini, of course, FIDE master, very solid player. You would expect him to do pretty well. He's 6th seed, and he's looked pretty good so far. He only lost to Kubakarov. Against Renjith, he's got a 1-0 score from the Dobell Cup, but again, that was 2019. So when you're talking juniors, the difference between Renjith as an 11-year-old and as a 14-year-old is chalk and cheese. So Piccini will have a tough time, but with the white pieces, of course, Jack Piccini is a very serious player. So the Melbourne player is favourite, but Renjith is a sort of unknown quantity. Stephen Solomon, another veteran, could have a hard time with the junior, Daniel Pobrabowski. Now, Pobrabowski upset Sam Grigg in the previous round, so he's playing quite well. I believe he's just turned 18. I'm not sure on that, but so he may not be considered a junior anymore. Stephen Solomon, 58 years old, and still trying to be the Iron Man of chess, but he's just less consistent, makes more mistakes. And Pobrabowski, who's very sharp tactically, could do him some damage, but you'd have to favour Solomon. Yi Lu against Aidan Brady. This is an interesting one because Aidan Brady is another of these up and comers. Brady is not actually that young. He's 22, and Yi is 25. But Brady's sort of had the wood on Yi, even though Yi's much higher rated. It's tied for an Australian Open, Queensland champion, even New South Wales champion once. So you'd expect Yi to be doing well, but in fact it's 1-0 to Aidan Brady with 2 draws. So that is quite impressive and does show. And this tournament also shows that Brady tends to lift his game against strong players. So he drew with Zhao Zhongwan, and in the first round, I think he beat Peter Froelich, another of the international masters. So Aidan Brady is in great shape. By the way, if we go right down to the bottom board 17, you see poor old Peter Froelich, the 7th seed. He started with 3 zeros. It's really sad to see, but he really hasn't played chess much recently. So it can happen. You just have to miss some tactics and your position can fall apart. Although the way he lost to Stephen Solomon in the second round was just sad. It's not what you'd expect of a strong player. So, Aidan Brady Yi Lu, Dusan Stojic feels like a veteran. In fact, his opponent, Jean Nicauchi, feels like a bit of a veteran, but Dusan's only 32 and Jean Nicauchi's 26. They've both been around since they were about 10 or 11 playing in World Youth Championships, and so they feel like they've been there forever. Dusan's moved up from Melbourne to Queensland and has to be favourite, but Nicauchi has already pulled off a draw against Rishi Sardana and also a draw against Stephen Solomon, so if he's in good shape, Nicauchi can play against anyone. Fred Litchfield from Canberra up against Mars Chi. Chi's already pulled off 1 upset in this tournament. Litchfield again is a class player. You'd expect him to win. And another Canberra player, Michael Cathro's had a bit of a disappointing time apart from his draw with Zhao Zhongwan, and he's up against Kelvin Fink, 28-year-old from Queensland. Again, you'd have to favour Cathro. And anything else interesting further down? 2 juniors, Byron Morris, Jackie Lee, playing each other. The Queenslander against the Victorian. The Victorian seems to outrate him dramatically. Jack Rogers, New South Wales champion, is sitting down on only 1 point, as is Lillian Liu, Australian girls champion. So, but of course, it's Peter Froelich down the bottom that is the big disappointment of the tournament. Okay, so let's move on to the games, and let's see how the top guys are going. So, Bobby Cheng played for the win with Bishop d5. He's used a bit of time in doing so, but I'm very pleased to see that we've got a real game on our hands. So, Queen b3 looks very dodgy. Black will castle, and if you take on b5, we can take on d4, for example. So, that doesn't look clever at all. Sorry, I should promote this variation, because this is what's really happened. So after Bishop d7, well, I can go to reference, we've got lots of games with this, nearly more than 100. So Rook c1 is the main line, and the move with the best score is Bishop takes c6, and I'm guessing the idea is Bishop takes d5 and then Bishop d4. That would be quite interesting. But someone like Van Welly managed to lose to a relatively weak player in this line. So this guy Massoni has played it a bit. If we go back in time, who was the first to use this? Well, we've already got Bishop d5. So we had Spassky on the white side, who probably made people want to give up the line. So this b5, if I go year now. So it first happened in a Spassky game. He took on d5 and ultimately won, but then lots of people played it in order to make a forced draw probably. And so the score is actually really, really good for black here. But more recently, well, still pretty good, but a lot of these will be blitz games. So it's a very decent line. You would expect Kubakarov to be playing a very decent line. So Bishop d5, Bishop d7, and I don't think we'll get another move for a little while. No, so Kubakarov's already 20 minutes up on the clock, and yeah, it's going to be tough for Cheng to prove any advantage, but he's very, very good at adjusting to positions he doesn't know that much about. So we'll see how Cheng goes. Remembering Cheng and Kubakarov have both got something at stake in this tournament. Kubakarov is the defending Australian champion. Bobby Cheng is the defending Gold Coast Open champion. And with the two being combined, well, we don't really know which one they value most. I suspect a Mickey Mouse Australian Championship title is probably better than a Gold Coast Open title, but yeah, it's certainly not a representative Australian Championship. It's not unexpected. It was just well, Gold Coast was asked to hold the Australian Championship, or at least give away the Australian Championship title to the winner. Dobell Cup in Canberra had already been offered that and refused. The Gold Coast Open got a bit of a financial sweetener, so their top prize was raised to $2,000. But ultimately, it all happened so late in the day that it didn't. Well, it was difficult to attract strong players to come up, and Timur Kubakarov came over from Perth only at the last moment. He, of course, will be heading off to the Olympiad along with Cheng and another player in the tournament, Zhao Zhongwan. So let's move to board 2. Well, and here we have a c3 Sicilian by Sardana. I'm sure we've got some more games. More moves here in a tick. And lots more moves. Okay, so knight c6 played, and now instead of d4, bishop c4, knight b6, I guess, bishop here, and c4. And this is one of the really complicated lines. You'd expect McClimate to play one of the really sharp lines like g5. That's the way he plays. He went queen c7 instead. So queen e2 is possible, and then g5 again is a move. But instead castle. So let's see. Knight takes. Takes. Is this a genuine pawn sacrifice? It certainly looks like there's a little bit of play, but white isn't very well developed. Queen f6, and now a4. So I guess white's idea is to play a5 and try and pick up the c4 pawn. But of course black can play d5 here and find a square for the knight on d7. That does slow the development down a little bit, but not fatally. What other moves have we got? We've got a5 if we really want to stop it. It does allow knight a3, but that's not deadly. So I'm a little bit baffled by a4, but I guess McClimate will be having a bit of a think here. How often has castles been played? Because I don't remember that too often. It has been played a bit. Okay, take. Rook e1. And now queen f6 has a tremendous score for white after both d3 and a4. So we have a lot of games with a4, and white's won almost all of them. That is usually a bit of a worry. I presume this is a blitz game. If it's not, then yep, it's a blitz game, so we can not worry about it. Some 2020 games are blitz games, yep, so 2 of those wins are blitz games. Luke Van Welly just played quietly. Oh, and he's going okay, but ultimately it was drawn. So aggressive play by White, and the older game A5. These are not such strong players in the 3rd division of the British Team Championship. So something weird, but nice move, I have to admit. And knight d6 check, and then knight f7 check. So that's clever, but it doesn't indicate what should happen in this position. So back to Rishi Sardana's game with Brady McClimate. We have something though that's pretty interesting. Sardana's going for it. McClimate will be very happy because he's just a good calculator. And if he doesn't have to find plans, but he just has to find good moves, then he's extremely strong at that. So I think he'll be pretty happy with the choice of opening by Sardana. So we'll save that and go to board 3. Okay, I must have left that a bit early because now we have a lot of moves. Okay, so what's the best way to do this? So g6, here, I presume castles, knight c6, c4, and black plays e5. So Zhao Zongwan is playing what's called the Botvinnik system, which is leaving the hole open on d5, but getting ready for putting the knight on e7 and playing f5, or sometimes a6 and b5, depending on what you're allowed. So knight c3 is fine, knight e7, and now probably knight e1 is the go if white wants an advantage, because you can play knight c2 and then knight e3. And black is just not quick enough in playing d6, bishop e6 and d5. Instead, after d3, d6, knight e1 is answered by bishop e6 and then knight c2 by d5. So a3 played. Castles, because at the moment b4 is not a threat. So rook b1 and a5 kills that one as well. So knight d2. Here I'm not sure there's a real threat, but bishop e6 makes sure you can't land a knight on d5 under good circumstances. Knight d5 and now rook b8. So white cannot play b4 here, because if you play b4, we take, and we've stolen a pawn. In the meantime, black is threatening b5. So white could try knight e4 here. Oh, perhaps not actually. Bishop takes d5 seems to may well win something. So yeah, white is struggling to find a good move. f4 is possible, but it threatens absolutely nothing, and we can play b5. Now b5 by itself doesn't do too much damage, but if you get to swap on c4 and white has to take with the pawn, then if black can play f5 and e4, you can cut off that knight on d5 from its support. So that's the sort of plan that black will be going for. I think this is a good version of a Botvinnik system for black. Knight d2 is not terrible, but it's certainly not optimum. And if you can't play b4, then it's hard to know what you're going to do. So, and here if knight takes e7, black may well be able to just take with the queen and not worry about anything about playing b5 so quickly. But because if knight takes e7 and you take back with the knight, then perhaps white can play b4. And yeah, that may give white a very small advantage. I don't know if he's done it yet, or no, he hasn't moved yet. What's the clock time? Should be very good for black. No, they're about equal. So both used about 15 minutes. Okay, so that's our board 3 battle between 12-year-old Jaden Oy and 36-year-old Xiao Song Wan. And I should stress he's 36 because tomorrow I'm going to be talking about 37-year-old Xiao Song Wan. So I wonder if the organisers are going to bring out a chocolate chess set birthday cake or something like that. Xiao Song Wan's history in Queensland and in national championships begins with the Australian Open of 1999 on the Sunshine Coast. Gold Coast, where this tournament's being played, is south of Brisbane. Sunshine Coast is north of Brisbane, the Queensland capital. And he was aged 13 years old, and they announced each round that the biggest upset prize would win a chocolate chess set. And Xiao Song Wan was rather keen on chess and rather keen on chocolate. So in the first round, his rating, I think, was below 1,000. He beats someone good and got the chocolate chess set. Finished it off in time for round 2. In round 2, he finished off during round 2. Round 2, he then upset someone even stronger. He got another chocolate chess set the next morning. And then round 3, he beat someone even stronger, got another chocolate chess set, and finally in round 4, he ran into one of the top seeds, Gary Lane. Couldn't beat him, but everyone was thinking they'd better change the prize anyway because this kid is going to become very, very unhealthy with too many chocolate chess sets. But the liking for chocolate chess sets and other food did get Xiao Song Wan the epithet Kung Fu Panda for a while, but the days are long gone when he could bankrupt an all-you-can-eat Pizza Hut. It's certainly he's certainly now a general practitioner and sort of understands quite a lot about healthy living and sets a pretty good example himself. So anyway, Jaden Oy is not in the same class as Xiao Song Wan at 13. I think at 13 or maybe 14, Xiao Song Wan finished second in the Australian Championship. So it must have been the year after. So in 2000, when he was 14, he finished second in the Australian Championship. So he was an absolutely prodigious talent. But studies did cause him to not become a grandmaster until 2007, 8, I think. Maybe it was 2007. He took off for the university holidays. He had 2 months. He played 4 tournaments, got 3 grandmaster norms, and came home to Australia a grandmaster. So that's I think the fastest between first norm and last by any player looking for a grandmaster norm, the grandmaster title rather. So that's board 3, and let's have a look at Jack Puccini and Sravan Rengis. So another adult against another kiddie. This one is a Petrov's defense. So Rengis may have learnt this from Stephen Solomon. Knight c3 is the most aggressive way of playing it. Takes, bishop e3. So we saw lots of games 10 years or so ago in high levels with this stuff. A particularly notable Karyakin-Kramnik game where Karyakin basically played h4 and put a knight on g5 and just left it there, and won a very nice attacking game. Let's see if there's any more moves. There probably will be, indeed. So knight c6 played, queen d2 and bishop e6. So black's thinking about going queenside, castles, but he didn't. Castles kingside. So not too much going on here. King b1, knight e5, knight d4, knight c4. So at least he picks up a pair of bishops. I'm not sure why Puccini is thinking around here. I would expect you would take that knight, but maybe that just is nothing. Take, knight f5, bishop f6. I don't really see any problem at all for black. Maybe you take and play b3. So knight e6, by the way, is impossible. Sorry, I should have it here. Because of knight d2 with check. That's maybe the downside of king b1. So this is just a normal Petrov defense. and it looks to me as if the opening is nothing special for white, but that doesn't matter too much. We may yet see the game becoming more exciting soon. Okay. Gee, these two seem out of... Oh no, Solomon's next. Stephen Solomon, the veteran, against the 18-year-old from Melbourne, Daniel Pobrabovsky. And this one is a Taimanov variation of the Sicilian. Everybody's playing Queen C7 nowadays because A6, knight takes C6, B takes C6, bishop D3 seems to give white quite good attacking chances. So you play Queen C7 and you don't care about knight B5 because then Queen B8, and that should be absolutely satisfactory for black with A6 later. So bishop E2, A6 anyway, castles. Knight F6, we're right in the main line. There are two main variations here. One's King H1 to play F4. One is Bishop B4. One is Bishop E3, and Bishop B4. Knight A4 played. So this is old stuff. In fact, I used this in the last round of the Bled Olympiad against Muhammad Al-Modiaki, and it cost me a silver medal because I lost, and Al-Modiaki did in fact win a medal. So I think I was sitting on 8 out of 11 at that point, but yeah, I do think that it does give good compensation. You can grab on E4, but white will reply with C4. Let's see what's going on. Have there been more moves? Lots of them. Okay, so he didn't take on E4 immediately. He started with Bishop E7, which is fine, and now C4. So we're giving the pawn away. Knight takes, knight here, and C5. So you can't really take on C5. If you take with the knight, I think knight takes C6 and rook C1 is going to hurt a lot. If you take with the bishop, knight takes, and something like knight F5, followed by bishop takes, getting in on the D6 square and stopping you from castling. So castles is necessary, and I think I played rook C1 against Modiaki. I did indeed. Knight F6, and white's got to choose what to play here. Bishop F3 is fairly normal. I think there's moves like G3. Knight B6 is not supposed to be so scary, but it has a good score. So that is, let's see. If we go back to, let's go back. Yeah, so this started in the 90s, eh? And Polgar, that's right, Polgar was playing it with success. And you just have pressure. And you've got your pawn back. Okay, that was a fast game though. Doesn't tell us too much. So knight F6. So G3 has the idea bishop F4, I think. Knight B6, rook B8. I can't remember exactly why you're doing that. It's something to do with the knight coming back to C4 later, but so let's see. Bishop F3. Apparently bishop takes C5 doesn't work. Not sure why. G3 with bishop F4 again, of course. And A3 threatening B4. And all of them have done okay, but we haven't had too many good players playing this stuff, so yeah, but then again, yeah, this is not really trendy anymore. So we have one game from the 2020s, and that's all. So white hasn't moved yet, and black's plan is actually quite easy. D6, pawn takes, bishop takes, and try and squirm out later, which is basically what Al-Modiaki did. So you really want to cover D6, but at the moment you can't go knight B6, knight C4, And yeah, a3, b4 is definitely a plan as well, but black is playing d6 at some point. So bishop f3, I think the problem with bishop f3 here may be knight e5, and you don't really want to give up that bishop. So it's, yeah, I don't know how much theory Stephen Solomon remembers of this. Let's have a look at the clocks. He's certainly, up to this point, played faster. But, yeah, black is playing very sensibly. Yeah, bishop f3 does make a lot of sense. But knight e5, bishop f4, I'm really not sure about that. Knight takes f3, queen takes, and then queen c6. Does look okay. So I don't trust this for... don't trust bishop f3 for white. So perhaps knight b6 is best. Let's see what the computer says. Knight b6, rook b8, queen a4. Never played. Okay. But the fact that the computer is saying white is better is a good indication that white is really better, because white is a pawn down and without a pawn center really, and yet the computer is regarding white as having an advantage. So that usually would mean that you've got a real advantage. Okay, let's move on to the next game, which is Aidan Brady against Yi Lu. Oh, so Yi must have been late, I guess. Because no moves. Let's see if he's made it. Oh, has indeed, and this looks like one of their other games, actually. So it's a French defense and a normal main line. Everybody's playing e5 rather than bishop g5 nowadays. Knight here, bishop e3. And which line did he choose? Rook b8. Wow. Okay. Now, I must admit I hadn't seen that one too much. I know there's queen b6 lines. You can take on d4. You've got a6. You've probably got bishop e7. Rook b8 strikes me as something a bit weird. Has it been played? Yes, it has, rather a lot. And even against Nepomniachtchi. So Nakamura beat Nepomniachtchi with it. Well, that is encouraging. So you'd expect queen d2 anyway. That's what happened. And now queen a5. Why is that so good? Is it the way Nakamura played it? Doesn't look it. How old is this? Probably not very old at all. 1994, yeah. So, but it's had reasonable results. If 51% with the main line, when normally white should get 54, 55, so that's encouraging. DC5 doesn't have a good score, and I think that's what Aidan did. He did indeed. Pawn takes, bishop takes without losing a tempo. Knight takes. Yeah, and here b5, b4, and knight e4 is one of these possible problems. So Aidan Brady is thinking again. He's already over half an hour behind on the clock. It's not that his position's bad. I think if I throw this on a computer, they're going to say fractionally better for white. Yep, but not really convinced. Rook b1 or a3, well, a3 doesn't threaten anything. Rook b1 looks super weird. So, yeah, the path to a small advantage seems very, very obscure. So, I think black should be pretty happy here. And, yeah, is b5 a threat? I think so. So b5, if you play knight takes b5, we just take with the rook, and we're going to get two pieces for a rook. And otherwise we'll get b4. So bishop d3 looks like a very, very normal move, just in order to castle. And yeah, I don't see a big problem with that. Maybe it's not an advantage, but it should be absolutely satisfactory. So Aidan Brady is not worse against Yi, but half an hour down on the clock can always be a problem. So the young Queenslanders are battling at it. Next one is Gene Nikauchi against Dusan Stojic. On paper and rating, Stojic is the favourite, but you'd always back Nikauchi in a manoeuvring struggle. And here, but Nakauchi is trying to head for a hedgehog, because that is the Sicilian defence he's been playing since he was a junior. He knows those setups very, very well. Hopefully we've got a few more moves. We do indeed. I might actually try... might try a chest-bait trick and just copy these and paste them in and see if it works. Certainly does. Okay, so castles e6, c4, knight f6, knight c3. Just waiting on white to play e4 and d4. And rook e1 shows that storage will oblige. Castles e4, d6, d4, take, take. Now you've got to be careful here. If you play knight bd7 with black, you run into e5 and suddenly you're worse. So you need to protect that bishop. You'd want your queen on c7, but at the moment there's knight b5. So you haven't quite got your pieces where you want them. Rook c1, and now knight c5 is a funny old move, when a6 or something like that would be normal. Yeah, I think, by the way, a move like rook d8 is probably quite bad because of knight d5, I think. Takes, takes, queen here, knight c6. And you're going at some point you're going to have to block with knight c5, and we'll play b4, and we'll hang on to, I would rather get back our piece because of the c7 threat. So you've got to be very careful about putting your rook on d8. So that walks into all sorts of tactics. So ultimately, I think you want to go a6 and queen c7, but I'm just a little bit surprised here. Yeah, a6 is the main move, but knight c5 has been played, including by Alex Wall or not? Oh no, Alex Wall played a6 and drew with Josef Horvath. But this is 20 years ago when, and I should mention Alex Wall was a late withdrawer from the tournament with some teeth problems, I believe. So, there's no indication that he's going to reappear. So, I think, yeah, he's dropped out. So the 1992 Australian champion. There were 5 Australian champions in the field. Now there's only 4. I'm just looking for a possible Johansson game, but no, or a Nakauchi game. There aren't any. So knight c5 is a bit surprising. We could certainly play queen c2, and now d5's not working. Yeah, I just can imagine that knight's going to be forced back after b4 at some point. So I'm. By the way, if you play queen takes pawn on c4, then knight d5 forces you to give up your queen with pawn takes knight. But those positions are usually very good for white because white will have knight f5 at the end, and that should work out well. The queen sacrifice, even though you get rook, knight, and pawn for the queen, it's not really good enough. Okay, knight c5, and I don't think we've had a reply. Is that right? No, and we're waiting on it. So that is the board 7 game, 10th seed against 13th. So it should be a decent battle. Fred Litchfield against Mars C. And looks like it's going to be a fairly normal Queen's Gambit. Whoa, lots has happened. Okay, so e3 played to avoid any real Slav variation lines. And now the g6 line. Okay, so not too much going on, I would expect. Castles, castles. b3 and now knight e4. So black's thinking about a quick c5 move, I guess. a5, wow. Knight here, take, take. So it still feels very, very reasonable for black. I don't think Litchfield has really got any great hope for an advantage here. Knight h4, e6. Okay, sometimes this pawn structure is fine. Knight takes, e takes. You'd prefer to take with the g pawn, I must admit. in a lot of these positions to keep your d pawn better protected. But black is banking on the fact that if white swaps on d5 and plays bishop f3, you can cover it with knight f6 and knight e4. So there's a few things here white will want to do. White is mobilize that bishop on c3, and that probably involves going to b2 and a3. That means you never ever want to play c5 unless you're actually winning that pawn on a5, and I doubt that'll ever be the case. Yeah, black's going to play knight f6, knight e4, and white's b3 means you can't play queen b3 and put extra pressure on the d5 pawn either. So maybe this is fine. I'm just going to check, but I reckon white's not really better here. So at the moment they say 0.77 with swap, swap, and a4. That's again bishop b2 and bishop a3 ideas. Well, they think it's a bit better for white. Oh, okay, playing a4 and b4. And yeah, your pawn structure is not too bad there with white. Black's knight sitting on e4 is great insurance, and it's really hard for white to get rid of it with f3 without leaving a very weak e3 pawn. So once the black knight gets to e4, it should work out well. Okay, there's a question on the chat, and that is, does the fact that this incorporates the Australian Championship negate the need for foreign opponents? The questioner is talking about norms, international master norms, and grandmaster norms. Normally, in a 9-round tournament, you have to play at least 4 non-Australian players to get a norm in a tournament like this, but the Federation is able to nominate 1 tournament each year as a national championship, which doesn't require that foreigner requirement. So I presume the Australian Chess Federation will be nominating the Gold Coast Open as that tournament. So yes, this will be a tournament where the foreign requirement is not there. You'll still have to get the average rating for, say, for a Grandmaster norm of just over 2380. You'll still have to get the required score with a performance rating of over 2600. You'll still need to play 3 Grandmasters. That is rather tricky with only 3 Grandmasters in the field, though fortunately they're still at the top. It'll be more realistic for someone to try for an international master result, but we really won't know who's in the running for that until about round 6 or round 7, because there are so many low rateds in the field that you only have to play a few of them, and your chances of getting the average field are quite tough. At least, yeah, the average field you need for an international master norm is just over 2300. So it's in order to get a 20. Oh, hang on, no, you could go lower than that to get a 2450 performance rating. It's not so bad, but it still won't be easy to do. When you have a look at the field, and you look for the number of that doesn't. Let's go players by rating. So you look at the number of players over 2200, and you've only got 9 of them on FIDE rating list. Many more on Australian ratings, but they don't help at all. So yeah, so if you need a high average rating, if you need 2380 to get a Grandmaster norm, well, I'm looking at this, I'm beginning to think it's almost impossible, even if you play the top 9 seeds. Oh, you could play the top 9 seeds, but nobody's going to do that, because in round 1 they're going to be paired with someone weaker, and most likely anyone who's going for a Grandmaster norm is among the top 9 seeds, so they can't play themselves. Yeah, it is close to impossible to get a Grandmaster norm in this field. They really needed 1 or 2 more Grandmasters. I believe Kubakarov did get one of his norms in the Gold Coast Open 5 years ago. So it is certainly theoretically possible, but not with this field. So, by the way, anyone who's got questions could just throw them in the Twitch chat. Okay, this is Mars. Chi's been quite impressive in this tournament, and yeah, as I mentioned before in one of the roundups, he is the founding member of the Mars Chess Club, which in fact is in Brisbane. So that's Mars. And we've still got more we're covering. Kelvin Fink from Queensland against Canberra's Michael Kethrow. Just a normal Sicilian. Obviously, I left this one a bit early. Whoa, that looks like a lot of theory. Okay, so it starts out as a Taimanov variation with Queen C7, I presume. And now is it Bishop E3? Yep. A6 and Queen F3. Now, Anton Smirnov has been playing this with quite a bit of success. The idea is just to go Queen G3 and to set up some sort of endgame where white's a bit better. It's not that ambitious, and yet it has wonderful results. So Knight E5, Queen G3, B5 is saying, okay, if you play F4, I'm going to play Knight C4. More to the point, though, you've got to be careful about a Knight takes B5 sacrifice. So fortunately, you've got Queen A5 check when you need it. But you also are leaving your bishop on F8 for the foreseeable future, which can have unfortunate consequences. So castle's queenside, Knight F6, and now he goes for F4. So Knight C4, I presume he'll take. No, Knight G4, wow. So Knight G4. I guess my first question is, why not Bishop G1? Because that is a natural square. And the answer might be B4 and Knight E4 still seems to lose that. Let's see what other people have done, because this has got to have happened before. Bishop G1 is the most common move. Okay. And in fact, it has the best score. No, Bishop D2 has a better score. Let's have a look. So Bishop G1, H5. Well, I saw that, but I didn't really see the point. So why can't you go H3? Well, why not E5? That's another way of trying to win a piece. My goodness, B4 and the whole thing goes crazy. Okay. White still seems to do well with Knight A4, but I can understand why you don't really want to go into that. And yeah, if H3, then you go B4 as well. So okay, that is super complicated. Bishop D2. Now the knight on D4 is a little bit unstable, but how you get at it, I'm not sure. B4 played. Knight here and H5 now. Again, I guess this is all theory because they're barreling along. So Caruana and Nepomniachtchi have both played Bishop D3 here, and Queen E1 looks rather interesting too. You've got to be a little bit careful about that knight on A4, but usually you can just save it with B3 without allowing any particular attack. So E4 is hanging at the moment, by the way. After H5, the knight on G4 is not hanging, so you're threatening knight takes E4. So what did he play? Bishop D3, D5. Is Kethrow really way up on the clock? Oh, we don't have clocks, sadly. But my guess is we're only an hour into the session. This is really... it doesn't feel like something people can play quickly. Okay, so E5. The only way to justify this, I'm sure, is to go Knight E4. Take, take. That's my prediction. Indeed. H3, then sorry about that. H3, the knight goes back to H6. Okay, so Knight F5 will come sometime. Whoa, and now Bishop takes B4. Either this wins or it's all very sad. Take, take, Queen takes here. So do you have any way of saving your rook without losing your knight? I guess Rook G8 is probably the best. Queen takes. So I wonder what's going on here. White is up. A pawn? 2 pawns? 2 pawns. Black has a pair of bishops, but they're not doing that much. So the problem is the knight on A4, I suppose. because after bishop d7, if you play b3, I think I just take the knight and mate you with queen c3. That looks pretty strong. Okay, so after b3, bishop takes a4, maybe knight takes e6, but then queen c3 anyway looks really, really strong. So what can white do? Well, knight c3, bishop c3 looks pretty horrible. So my guess is white has to keep attacking. And the only way to do it is f5. And if you take it, e6. And he's played f5. Sadly, we don't have clock times. But yeah, this position seems to have been around for a while. And if I cheat, my guess is my 0.0 for a while. So bishop takes a... oh, dear. Okay, their main line is bishop takes, pawn takes, rook takes. Wow. Okay, my first thought is queen h8 and queen f6 already a draw? No, because there's bishop f8. So the threat, I guess, is rook c2 check, but you can still go king b1, so there's no mating threat. White doesn't have to say it with checks. If we take on f7, queen takes, rook f1 looks interesting. Very interesting. Though we do have rook f2 in reply. So nothing is that easy. In fact, I think I've just missed something. Takes, rook f1. I might have this bishop d2 check move. I've forgotten the queen on h6 was hanging. And that looks pretty good. So there's nothing really easy here. Well, you wouldn't expect it if the computer keeps saying 0.0 or something similar. But, okay, it's incredibly, it's not better for black or white. It's very, very weird. But f5's a good move. So Kelvin Fink, 28-year-old from Queensland, is giving his much higher rated opponent Michael Cathro a real run for his money. And anything could happen here, but as a general rule, I will always say the person with the safer king is more likely to do well. And so, yeah, I'll go for that. So now I might take a short break and leave you with a recent advertisement by the company Nike, who spent 5 minutes on a chess ad. And here it is.
Zimmy, do you know? I've seen it all before. Seen Prefontaine set 11 records before he was 24. Howdy! I've seen Marie crash the race and do it all at her own pace. I've seen real rock stars turn to racketeers, you hear? I've seen the tiger earn a stripe. That's right. I've seen Bo block, slide, catch, hit. You know Bo? Cause Bo knows.
Bo, you don't know diddly.
I've been riding my main man Money since '88. He ain't never left me hanging.
Oh, Money, why you want to do that to me? Why you leave me hanging?
Except for that one time. Hey! Well, how about Money's gold chain take flight? I was there, and I was there that night. All right? I've seen three dudes with the same name with their stamp on a beautiful game.
Amazing footwork.
Oh, sensational! See, I seen the kid wag his back and send it deep into outer space. I seen Joni become the first to finish the race. I seen Bro doing things back in the day that was insane. Cause nobody catch my main man, Luke Jang. I've seen rounds, bounds, no-look passes, and rebounds. Unbelievable plays.
Not a role model.
I've also seen champions like Mia, Alex, and Megan use their sport to trailblaze. I've seen a dude with no legs run so fast, gave my neck whiplash. I've seen a little black girl do what they used to say no little black girl can do. Not just Serena, I'm talking Lisa and Cheryl too. I've seen 6-1 points in MSG. Rest in peace forever. Mamba with the mentality.
Mamba out.
I seen Justice shout from the 5th-yard line or then bend the knee of a record-breaking QB, all in the name of equality. I seen the craziest things. Even seen a young kid from Akron become a king. I seen the walk-off, the king of course, the fattest, the coldest, the ghost, how to do all and everything in between. There ain't nothing I ain't seen. Zimmy.
Okay, old school. With all due respect, the past was great and all, but the future's on deck. Tell me, have you seen someone ball like John Morant? Oh, do you know? You know you can't. And don't even talk to me about no gold chains. Cause Joe Burr got hands down the coldest one in the game.
They're definitely real.
You've never seen anyone like Paisa, Chenyi, Sky, or Chloe Kim. Do you know there's never been anyone else like them? And look, Unc, I'm not trying to give you no toot, but my girl Naomi, yo, she's the best at what she do. Facts. I know in your day you've seen some pretty impossible feats, but they ain't got nothing on my guy Mbappe or the Greek freak. The Greek freak?
Whoa, my goodness.
And you ain't never seen a person, place, or thing that can outrun a thing. Give my girl that gold. Bling, bling, or nothing. Do you know? Do you know you've never seen handles like Sabrina, AKA the point guard queen? Or step back like Luka got? That thing is mean. And you ain't gotta look too far down the block to see Sam. Cause she always shooting her shot. Do you know? Do you know about Raylan and her skills?
And who's Raylan?
Oh, just wait, cause you will. Okay, so don't blow a fuse. One thing we can agree on is that...
Yo, it's gotta be the shoes!
Look, OG, no disrespect. I know you think you've seen everything, but you ain't seen nothing yet. Checkmate.
So that is how not to play chess. I think some keen observers have noticed that the final position is not even checkmate. We have had a couple of moves, bishop a4, pawn takes e6, and I guess Michael Kethro is going to take on g2, but gee, it's scary if you're black in these positions. White has to go for it. White was losing the knight anyway. Black certainly just has to make sure you don't miss anything, because otherwise you're just going to get mated. Okay, let's go back to the top board. And where were we? It's... Oh, have I not kept that one open? Perhaps not. Bobby Cheng against Timur Kubakarov. We left it with a Grunfeld defense. Cheng trying to win in a line where he could have taken a draw. That's always feeling a little bit nerve-wracking because you kick yourself if you actually lose the game. And, well, he did in fact take on c6. Okay, so we haven't got that game open yet. No, because chess-base freezes. Of course it does. So let's have a look on the other board, the live board. So bishop takes c6 played. Then bishop takes back, d5. If bishop takes rook, queen takes, then already you are winning material. So bishop d7, and we get rid of those bishops. Takes, check. Queen d2. There's a big question about whether this ending is even really better for white, but it's going to be annoying to play black because the white knight will sit on d4. Maybe if black can break things up with e6, there might be some potential for the black queenside majority to get moving, but white is a little bit quicker at getting the rooks to the centre, in particular controlling the c-file. So I actually think there'll be, whoever's advantage it is, it'll probably be a little bit in Bobby Cheng's favour. Still no... Oh, it has opened. Okay. Here we go. So, bishop d7, and he took, d5, bishop back, bishop d4, take, check, and queen d2. And I'm guessing this hasn't happened before. So, where did it vary? Bishop d4 has been played twice. Okay. And queen a5 check immediately played in all games. So why is that different? Well, perhaps after queen d2 takes, you could try to keep your bishop, but doesn't look ideal. White has certainly done quite okay here, but no really strong players on the black side, nowhere near as strong as Kubakarov, so Kubakarov's got to decide whether he wants this endgame or not. It's quite risky not to play the ending. If you play something like queen a3 to tie white down, white will probably castle. If you castle, then at some point queen h6 is going to be annoying. But before that, white can put a rook on c1, a knight on d4, maybe even a knight on c6. Yeah, there's lots of little things about black's position that are not perfect. Maybe queen a4 is a better move to try to hit that e4 pawn and lure the knight to c3 rather than d4. Still doesn't feel all that great, but I can imagine it goes okay. So this is a battle between the 25-year-old second seed Bobby Cheng, defending champion of the Gold Coast Open, and Timur Kubakarov, Australian champion, defending his title here, 21 years old. And both of them were not born in Australia. Bobby Cheng came from Hamilton, New Zealand, when he was probably about 10, I guess. No, maybe even younger. Yeah, about 10. He'd already been talent spotted in New Zealand, not just by his coach Ewan Green, but also Nigel Short when he came out to New Zealand when Cheng was about 8, complimented Cheng on his play in a simultaneous exhibition. And of course, Cheng, after a year in Australia, won the World Under-12 Championship and then went on to become the youngest ever Victorian champion, youngest ever Australian Open champion, and one of the youngest Australian champions in 2016. Yet he's only played one Olympiad in 2018. Of course, he would have played if there had been one in 2020. Yeah, so for his strength, he hasn't played Olympiads as often as you would have expected. Kubakarov has not played an Olympiad yet. Between the last Olympiad and this one, he has received Australian citizenship on what's called a gifted and talented program, which is open to sports and arts. Garfield Sobers, the cricketer, for example, received a similar visa when he came to live in Australia. There have been 3, maybe more chess visas given like that. Both Zhang Jilin and Julia Rianova both received gifted and talented visas. I think it might be called something else now. The key, I think, is whether you're going to walk into the Olympic team or not, because we had someone like Stefan? No, Dejan Antic, I think, was knocked back for a visa. So, and he was a strong player. Whether he would have been in the Olympic team was a moot point, I guess. Timur Kubakarov was already a big talent by the time he came to Australia. In fact, by the time he applied for the citizenship, he was already Australian Open champion and Australian champion and Australian Masters champion. So he had a pretty good case. And earlier you had both Alex Davidovich, the international master who came out about the time of about 1987, I think, and also Daniela Nutu-Gajic, who came out during the Yugoslav wars, and she benefited mainly from her chess talents, but also there was a special category in migration in Australia at that point for people coming from Bosnia who were in mixed marriages. By mixed, I mean one half might be Serb, the other Croat, or some other combination. In this case, Daniela Nutu-Gajic was Romanian, and her husband was Bosnian Serb. And sadly, he has died a few years ago. Okay, that's board one. Let's go to Rishi Sardana. We left it very complicated position, I must admit. Oh, why is it? I don't know why. Stop. And let's go here. Whoa. Okay, interesting stuff. So after a4, instead of e6, black went d5. So a5, d3, sorry, knight d7, d3, take. And it turns out this is not so easy to play because if you play e6, which is what eventually McClimate did, queen takes pawn, picks up the lost pawn, and white has a very active position now. So it feels like it's better for white. Now, a6 is certainly a threat. Black can play bishop e7 and threaten to take the queen, or bishop c5 and threaten to take on f2. Either way, getting the development underway as fast as possible. But the fact that McClimate did play bishop c5, a bit more active. So bishop e3 is impossible, I think, because a pawn takes queen, and I think that will finish up in material. So you can, what can you do? You don't have an easy queen move to guard f2. Rook e2 would allow bishop f2 check anyway, maybe even queen f2. Probably queen f2 is even better. So, yeah, it's a little bit awkward. Queen d2, of course, it should be absolutely fine. Queen d2 followed by queen e2, it's hard to see a problem. But at least black is getting a bit of time to develop. I'm still worried about that bishop on c8. But, so I'm guessing after queen d2, white is better. Much better, they say. Wow. Okay. So, and they also give this move I hadn't even looked at, but very computery move, queen f5. And that's certainly not bad at all. So that stops the threats and just threatens to get a slightly better ending. So Sardana appears to be slightly better here. So we'll see how we go from here. Come on, we're around board 3. Jayden Oy, he's getting into an English opening I'm not sure he knows that much about, against the third seed, Xiao Song-Wan. And indeed, gee, this looks really, really good. So, knight b3 played. And I'm struggling to see what sort of a square that is. So, b5 looks great. Bishop d2. Sorry, bishop d2. a4. Knight a1. Now, Jayden Oy's idea, I think, is that the a4 pawn is weak. Well, first of all, if you take on b5, you're leaving your d5 knight exposed, so that is a bit of a problem. We could also just play bishop takes d5 and knight a5. It doesn't look bad, but the knight on e7 might struggle to find a good square. Presumably, white would immediately break out with b3 and do his best there, so it's not so clear, this position. Oh, Queen D7 played. Indirectly defending A4, so if knight E7, knight E7, we're doing it. And knight C2, absolutely not a move I would trust. It's coming to E3, I agree, and that will be a good square. But as soon as it does, black can go knight D4 and try to jump in on B3, which will also be a very good square. So here, I suppose if we take on D5 and play knight D4, that could work out well. White will have a bishop pair, but I'm not sure how good that is. Bishop E3 I don't trust so much. Sorry, H3 rather, because there's knight E3 later. So maybe this is okay. Let's see. It's occasionally you can play A5, A4 and overreach. So they say take, and F5. And the idea is if knight E3, well, they say F4. I was thinking of E4, but okay, F4, take, knight D5, take, then bishop F5. So take, and this sort of position, yeah, is very good for black. They're saying -2. I don't know about that, but okay. So takes, and F5 and E4 is the general idea with knight E5. But if you don't get that, you might get F4 as well. So that does seem very logical. It's pretty astonishing to me they're saying black is doing well. Okay, F5 immediately. So that would seem to indicate that you should take on E7 and take on B5, but that's very slow. So he's doing without... I wonder if you could take on B5 first. But rook B5, or even takes on D5 with the bishop, both of them look absolutely fine. So I don't know, there's nothing to fear here for black. So F5 is pretty good as well. Okay, so really the high-rated players Sardana and Zhao are looking good. Let's see how Jack Puccini is doing against another little kid, 14-year-old Sravan Renjith. And Renjith looks like he's going for a draw, and I have to say he isn't doing a bad job of it. Now, Queen E2 was played. E2, not E1? E2, knight takes. Oh, it didn't. Okay, the idea is to get this sort of position. Pawn takes, queen takes, E5. You've got an opposite coloured bishop's position here. I'm not really trusting this for an advantage. Bishop D3, C6. Okay, so how much damage can you do with Queen E4? Queen E4, G6, H4, Rook F4. That is a problem. So Queen E4 by itself is not doing much. H4 first. So if bishop takes, I presume G3 amongst other things. Queen H3 is probably even better. So Queen B6 played. And now White has to start sacrificing things if you want to actually mate here. So the critical question is Queen E4, G6, and I presume the idea is H5, Rook F4. And that does indeed look like black is okay. So if you swap queens and play F3, then Rook F4 is actually a bit annoying, but I guess H5 is probably going to be a draw. Black has whatever advantage there would be. Rook takes F2 is a threat, so I don't see too many choices. Either you go for Queen E4 or you accept a draw. So Puccini's going to go Queen E4. I don't know why it says draw here, by the way. That's very weird. So it Well, it was someone's prediction, I guess. Okay, this is one of the quieter games. It certainly is. Let's go back to board 1, the battle of the top 2 seeds. And where is it? Bobby Cheng. We should have a move here from the top seed, Timur Kubakarov. And we have indeed. He swapped queens and he played e5. So if you take en passant, bishop takes, knight d4, bishop c4 looks absolutely fine. Knight on d4 is not totally stable, although it can be backed up with king e3. But the big thing is black's queenside majority that white is going to have to neutralize pretty quickly. However, if you don't take en passant, black will have f5 at some point. So the question is, what can white's knight do around here? There is an f4 move. I presume black will go f6. But then we could swap and go knight c1 and knight d3, and that looks quite dangerous. So if f4, if you take, we take with the knight, and we're heading back to d3 to go to c5 or e5. White king will head to d4. So probably he's not going to take en passant. Probably he is going to play f4 and try to keep an advantage that way. I guess I should double check this with the computer that thinks f4 is good and nothing else is bad, but nothing is taking en passant. So yeah, it just feels like a good moment for f4 because black is not developed yet. So white has a chance to try and get some running center pawns, for example, or reposition the knight to a really good square. So, and of course f4, f6, it's going to be a weak pawn on e5. Maybe black's king can defend it from d6, but you've got to be careful about white taking the f-file and rook f6 check and so on. So, and maybe it's okay. I mean, f4, f6, takes, knight here, king up, knight here, king here, rook across, rook here. Seems to be okay. But if it is okay, then we play a5, b4, bishop b5, and black might try to be better, but probably not. So maybe f4 can be answered by f6. There is no great obligation to swap, but black is threatening king e7, king d6 anyway. So I wonder if white should go knight g1, knight f3. So you can go knight g5 in some positions when the king's on d6. But most of the time the king will just drop back to e7 and won't do much. So probably black is okay here, but it's not easy at all. f4 has not been played, by the way. Okay, so a little bit about the tournament while we're waiting for some moves. The Gold Coast Open, this is the 28th edition of the tournament. It was cancelled in 2020 and 2021 due to lockdowns in Queensland. The number of players in this event is just over the 200 mark, which is not bad at all. I think does it put it in second place for Australian weekenders, or is it just behind Ballarat? I think it's just ahead of Ballarat in numbers. So Ballarat Begonia Open, which is on the Moomba weekend in Melbourne, or in Victoria in March each year. Certainly the most venerable tournament, the Dobell Cup, is the largest. It's getting consistently 300 plus players each year coming to Canberra. The Gold Coast Open prize money is $2,000 for first. I think that's a record for the Gold Coast Open. $1,500 second and only $500 third. I believe that is because the Australian Chess Federation added $500 to the first and second prizes, or offered $1,000 to bolster the prize fund, and they were added to the top two prizes. But that leaves a massive gap between second and third. In a prize list, you should never have a prize more than double the one just below it, because that can lead to very unfortunate outcomes, and I hope that won't happen in this tournament. The prize money goes down to $800, $300 for fourth, 250 for fifth, 200, 150, and 100. So there's at least it's a long prize list. But there's two substantial prizes. But of course, I should point out that $2,000 for an Australian Championship is the smallest prize in decades, and that's because it was just the Australian Championship is like an add-on to an already existing tournament. Previously, Australian Championship, Australian Junior, and Australian Open were standalone tournaments. Then it's not because of COVID in a way. Because the slippery slope began in 2018 when the Australian Chess Federation gave the rights to the Australian Open to an already existing tournament in Melbourne that was run around the New Year, between Christmas and the New Year. So suddenly the Australian Open was reduced to just 9 rounds, as the Australian Championship is here. My first Australian Championship was 15 rounds, and then it became 13, and more recently it's been 11, but it had never been below 11, nor had the Australian Open until the 2018 event, and then we have this tournament, only 9 rounds deciding the Australian champion, which is also just randomising the result a bit more. Although, to be honest, with a field like this, you would expect after 9 rounds that the top players would have all played each other and that they'll be running out of strong opponents, and you could have some slightly absurd pairings. But a normal Australian Championship, of course, has much greater depth. I believe the minimum rating required is something like 2150 for Australian Championship. That would, if you use Australian ratings, that would probably only allow the first 20 players in this event into the tournament, and but of course the Gold Coast Open is a much more open event, doesn't have that sort of restriction, and so players with the ratings of 1600 have been allowed to play. Okay, the schedule, by the way, is 10 o'clock in the morning and 3:30 in the afternoon every day except the final day, which is Monday, and that will have a 9 o'clock start in the morning, and then a 2:30 finish. That will have a 2:30 final round start, which will hopefully enable some of the interstaters to get away that evening, because for Queensland, that's school holidays, but it's still not school holidays for other states, and I'm sure that's affected the attendance to some extent. Okay, this is not even the strongest Gold Coast Open, believe it or not. There were 5 Grandmasters pre-pandemic in 2018, though it should be remembered that many of them were foreign players, and it was easier to come to Australia then, or certainly more desirable, because we've currently got a situation where Australia is in a worse COVID situation than many countries in the world, and therefore not very attractive as a tourist destination. I should also mention that Daniel Fernandez, who's been such a dominator at Australian tournaments over the last couple of years, he came out as a student and was more or less stranded during the pandemic, happily stranded. He has finally gone back to Europe. So has Justin Tan, the Australian who has been based in Europe for a while. He's also gone back to Europe, and there's one other, I believe, that we're not seeing, but I can't think of him at the moment. And of course, Anton Smirnov, the number 1 Australian player, although not by Australian ratings but by FIDE ratings, he is studying at Australian National University, and I think he's going to the Olympiad, but not really having time to do much else. Australian Junior Champion Cameron McGowan also missed this event, although he'd entered, but he had to drop out at the last minute due to university exams. So, you should understand, of course, that the school holidays in Australia, at least the winter school holidays in particular, in fact, well, not just the winter school holidays, but in particular those ones, are staggered in Australia. So New South Wales and Victoria share dates this year, but Queensland does not. And the idea is to take the strain off the tourist infrastructure, so you don't have families of school kids from every state all wanting to go on holiday at the same time. Therefore, at the moment, it's school holidays in Queensland, but it is not in the southern states. and there's only 1 week each year, apart from the summer holidays, when almost all states share a holiday, and that is the week after this one, where the National Junior Training Squad will be held, and and in fact, every sport holds their national camp in that 1 week because they can get people from around the country. Let's see if there's any update. Still no move from Bobby Cheng. He's not quite caught up with Kubakarov, but he's getting close, so time isn't such a factor at the moment. So our next game, let's take Dusan Stojic, who was playing Jin Nikauchi, and it was a funny old hedgehog with knight c5. Not an unknown move. And the reply was queen c2, a6. And now white's got to decide, do I want to go b4 and send the knight back and then have to defend that pawn on c4? Well, in the end, white decided not to do that. He went h3 first. I think he's thinking about f4, and he doesn't want knight g4 happening. Rook e8. No, he wants g4. So the idea is g5, knight d7, b4, winning a piece. So you may as well throw h6 in. That's always a useful move. f4. This looks scary, but a good hedgehog player would not worry too much, though in many positions white would prefer to have a knight on g6. Here, is g5 a threat? It's not bad. We would take once and play knight h7. Again, we couldn't play knight d7 because of b4. So that knight on c5 is not that well placed, I have to admit. Nikauchi went knight h7 unprovoked. And here the question is, how can white get through to the e6 square? So if we play, for example, f5, we're giving away a lot of black squares, but we're threatening b4 followed by taking on e6. Now maybe f5, bishop g5 or bishop f6 is fine, because there's no pressure on the d6 pawn. And although the queen is a bit weird on c8, it certainly holds back most of the threats. Queen f2 followed by h4 would be interesting, because you don't need that much protection on e4 anymore. But I can't help thinking of queen f2, we might even go knight f6 again. And that might force you to protect your e4 pawn. So it's not so simple here for white to get through. If I put this on the computer, they're going to say at least +1, because they love this extra space. Computers aren't very good at hedgehogs. Well, not quite +1. It is coming down, which means they're not really finding much to do. They sort of want to play b4. It occurs in a lot of lines, and yet it's not leading anywhere. So, yeah, honestly, that's not very scary computer assessment for a position where you've got 4 pawns on the 4th rank and such a lot of space. Just a reminder, by the way, that if you've got any questions about the tournament, about the players, then you can always ask via Twitch. So we've already had one question. So let's see what else we have going. We haven't actually covered Jack Rogers, the New South Wales Champions game. Now, he's a fair way down against the Canberra Junior Sankirtan Badnarayan. And, yeah, well, obviously I left it a bit on the early side. So, yeah, Jack Rogers is consistent in wanting to play the Trompowsky. He doesn't like taking on f6. He just plays knight d2. This feels like a rather unsuccessful Rogers-Sarkis game of a long time ago. But let's see. They've made a lot of progress. So, knight d7. If you're really extravagant, you can go f4 before knight f3, but knight f3 is a lot more sensible. So, h6 is nothing much. e6. So, we're getting to a Torre attack, in fact. And And white castling, well, that may have been a fraction early. It's probably okay. Queen e2 looks to me like black is going queenside. c5, c3. Rook b8. Now that's aimed just to scare, I think. Oh no, sorry, it was rook e8. Rook e8, but why? Maybe some e5 move? I don't know. And white decided to go kingside. So I think white's looking for a quick e4, but maybe... yeah, this is not a perfect version for white. There is a variant of this, which goes but without h6. So h6 is actually useful, because if you play something normal, b6, knight e5, bishop here, queen a4 is possible. And the idea is knight takes, pawn takes, knight d7, queen h4 threatens mate and threatens the bishop on e7 and just wins material. So h6 was a useful extra to avoid that, which is probably why Jack Rogers went queen e2. So b6 played, now knight e5. This shouldn't be very scary. Takes, takes, has been played. Knight d7, takes, takes. f4, I think. Bishop b7, queen h5. So it's hard to see what white's really threatening here. Maybe f5, but it always leaves the e5 pawn terribly weak. In fact, I think we just take, queen takes, and g6 and knight e5. So that's not very good. g4, g5 doesn't look terribly scary. If you take on h6, we may just be able to go g6. Rook f3, rook g3, maybe. And black's move, d4. So white has to decide whether to go e4 or not. When you do go e4, it's very hard to play f5. There is both bishop e4 and knight e4 here, because I would really like a knight sitting on d6. But bishop e4, we have to worry about, say, take, take, take. Oh no, sorry, rook b8. But still, no, knight e4 is already very, very good. And we've won the exchange. So d4 looks a bit suspect because it allows either knight e4 or bishop e4. And if I could play bishop e4, I would. Now, perhaps knight f8 here. But then I suspect we can grab this pawn and play knight f3. Now, it may be a slightly weak pawn, but it's an extra one, and I'm happy with it. So I don't trust d4 at all by Bad Narayan. And yeah, I'd expect Rogers to either play bishop e4, knight c4 is possible too. Probably bishop a6 keeps that under control. Even then, we might be able to take that pawn. And I guess the other question is, can you just take the pawn? Originally, I thought queen b4 would win the pawn back immediately, but knight b3 solves that problem, so it's not so easy. Then there is bishop d5, but you moved all your pieces a long way from the queen side, so it's a king side, so maybe white will have something with f5. Okay, so I think white's got a lot of good options here. And that's probably what Jack Rogers is thinking. No clock times on this one, unfortunately. So, I think Jack Rogers is doing very well. He's only New South Wales champion for a couple more weeks. He won the title back in 2020, I think. They actually managed to hold a championship then. But since then, there hasn't been one. But there's one underway at the moment. And who's leading it? It's not exactly sure, but certainly it's well underway, and there will be another New South Wales champion. And in any case, Jack Rogers has moved to Queensland by now, so it's not relevant for him. And I should mention, when I say Jack Rogers, that of course he's a musician.
I made a trip to the jungle on a big game hunt. Got lost in the dead of night. Then all of a sudden, as I pushed through the woods, I beheld a most unusual sight.
Okay, that is not Jack Rogers, I'm afraid. This is the real Jack Rogers.
I'm done hating myself for feeling. I'm done crying myself away. I gotta leave and start the healing. But when you move like that, I just wanna stay. What have I become? Looking through your phone, no, love to you is just a game. Look what I've done, dialing up the numbers on you. I don't want my heart to break.
If he wins this Trompowsky, we'll play the whole thing, but we'll have to wait and see how this game pans out. But you can see, his voice is better than his chess openings. So, back to the main game. Still no move. It looks, still no move from Bobby Cheng. I should qualify that by saying that board 1 did break down on the first day of the transmission, so it could be that they're trying to put the moves in by hand here, or maybe haven't realised if it's broken down. Okay, Rishi Sardana against Brodie McClymont, and this has pretty well, where is the Sardana game? Proceeded as we thought, with Queen D2. So, castles, I presume? Yep, B4, Bishop E7, and White is just saying, I've got more space. Queen here, G6, and Knight D2. So White's pieces are coming out. Sure, the C-pawn is backward, but that's one of the more irrelevant features of the position. Black has desperately got to develop before White plays Knight E4, Bishop G5, or Queen H3, or something like that. Knight E5 would be nice, except it's totally unstable there, and Queen E4, or even Queen G3 would knock it away. So it's not easy to find a good move. Rook D8 perhaps with Knight F8, but I feel as if you need to cover your dark squares, and the Knight on D7 does a bit of a job there. You've got to be also careful of playing B6, because I suspect A6 will leave that bishop on C8 in a bit more trouble, and the rook on A8 exposed to all sorts of things. So this does feel very, very nice for Rishi Sardana, and this is a tough opponent. Brodie McClymont in Queensland is extremely dangerous. He's won multiple Gold Coast Opens, although, to be honest, his greatest result was not in Queensland. It was played in Sydney at the Zonal Tournament about a decade ago, and he tied for first with Max Illingworth, secured an international master title. In fact, the only reason he tied for first was he lost in the last round, and he lost the playoff after that to Illingworth, which was no disgrace at that time. but he showed he could be a very serious player. And he's kept his FIDE rating around the 2400 mark ever since. It's pretty hard to move it up when you're the highest rated player in your environment. Yeah, he's certainly on his home patch a serious player. Australia has a number of players like this who just don't have a chance very often to prove themselves outside their home state. I'm thinking of Trevor Tao in Adelaide in particular. There's a big Checkmate Open each year, and you basically have to get over Trevor in order to win the tournament. And not that many people do it, but I believe Zhao Zhongwan did it not so long ago. Yeah, and Brody McClimate's a bit like that. Igor Brilleberg in New South Wales barely plays outside. Dobell Cup, of course, occasionally. Barely plays outside Sydney. Just won the New South Wales Open with a very, very convincing score ahead of players like Sardana and Junta Ikeda. So he's again one who has, when he has home ground advantage, he's very, very serious. But anyway, looks good for Sardana right now. Lots of space, better pieces. Okay, a good idea by Jaden Oy. After f5, he played bishop g5. And I like that because it's one of those moves where you attack a piece that's controlling d5, and if you can take it, eventually you might finish up with a good knight on d5 against a bad bishop. So what did Black play? h6. Well, h6, bishop takes, knight takes. Oh, sorry, bishop takes, not knight takes. Check. Knight takes. And now we can either go knight e3 or we could swap first. I would be very tempted to swap first. Knight here. Take, take. e4. This could be a problem, though. Oh, a4's hanging. So that's not that great. So I should refrain from swapping, but bishop d5 is coming. I could play f4 and force you to play knight d5, but I don't mind knight d5 either, to be honest. So I'm not sure this is so great. Jaden Oy is thinking a bit, but white should not have got the opportunity to get the knight on c2 to d5. And that was just unnecessary. So, getting that tempo for bishop g5. You wouldn't play bishop g5 earlier because f6 would just have sent it away. But, now that's quite a common theme. Used to see Ulf Anderson in King's Indian sometimes just going bishop g5 and taking a knight on f6. Oh, well, it was a King's Indian against the English and doing quite well with that. So getting rid of that dark squared bishop makes white's space disadvantage a little bit less important, but the key is that square. So he's played knight e3, and my problem with that is that perhaps I can move my knight somewhere on e7, but I guess the only square I've got is c8. And that doesn't seem particularly good. Wonder if I could take on d5, take on c4. Let's have a look. Knight takes. Let's say bishop takes. Pawn takes, pawn takes. Bishop takes, knight takes, e4. I don't like working around a knight like that. Even a move like b4 takes. Sorry, takes here. Rook takes. They're weak pawns, I agree, on a3 and c4, but it is so hard to cope with a knight on d5. White can play e3 and prevent black from playing bishop d4, and even if you lose a pawn, it feels as if this is going to be absolutely fine for white. So Probably knight e3 is okay, but I must admit I would have taken on e7 first and dragged the queen away from the a4 pawn's defense. So I don't think Xiao Zhongwan has an advantage here. I'll just check. Computer does. Knight takes, bishop takes, bc4 takes, yeah. They think that position that we got is better for black. Well, we'll see. We'll see if the computer really knows what it's doing. So, move down a bit. We haven't looked at Stephen Solomon's game for a while, and it does seem to have gone a bit crazy. Where's Solo? There he is. So, knight f6. So, Solomon is a pawn down. Let's have a look. And a lot's happened. So, g3. Knight d5. Because you haven't played bishop f3, that is possible. And now, knight b6. Gosh, that is tricky. Wow, knight e3, I guess we take on a8. Then we could probably go queen e5. This is crazy. Knight e3, knight a8. What's wrong with queen e5? Probably knight takes c6, and then we can take back on e3, and we might just get to stay a rook up. Okay, so knight takes, queen played. Knight takes here. Solomon is an exchange up, but black has 2 pawns. If the knight on b2 can escape, then I reckon black might be doing well, because the knight on c7 has some difficulty escaping. So knight b3 played. Here, if knight takes d4, bishop takes d1. Okay, so knight b3 played. How do we get our knight out? After, say, bishop d8, oh, we have to go to a8 again. And we can go to a8 again. And rescue it that way. Fair enough. So, knight b4. I don't know where it's going. Knight d3 maybe? a3 played. So Solomon doesn't believe it. So knight d3, I presume the idea is to go rook c2 and tie both those knights down. Now, is that going to be winning material or not? If bishop d8, we do have knight a8. If d6, rook b1 might be good. Or maybe pawn takes d6 and bishop takes knight and then rook d1. That also looks good. So he didn't go knight d3, he went bishop d8. And I have to say that gives lots of nice options. The idea though is knight a8, knight d5. To try and keep that knight hemmed in. And even there I'm not sure what would happen after bishop f3. So after bishop d8, we have the very pleasant option of taking on b4. And maybe even playing rook a1 and trying to trap the knight that way. That doesn't look bad either. He did in fact do this. Bishop takes and rook c2. Wow. Maybe it's trapped that way too. So if knight a4, then rook a1 is winning. I think. Oh no, b5 hangs on. So what happens after knight a4? Nothing in particular, but he played bishop e5 instead. So now if rook b1, knight a4 threatens knight c3. So that is at least very, very active. If black can hang on to that knight there, then I suspect black's doing quite well. Right now, black has 2 pawns for the exchange, although freeing the bishop on c8 is, of course, a challenge. Rook a1 played. That is, real Solomon chess. Okay, the threat is rook a2, trapping the knight. You have 4 discoveries with your knight. 2 of them get taken by a rook. Oh, in fact, hang on. Wherever you go, you get taken. And bishop takes, rook, knight takes, because the rook on a1 is defended. So white will have a clear piece up for 2 pawns then. And that will be pretty good. So what about d5? Pawn takes en passant. Rook 8. And then have we got a discovery? Not really. So rook a2 is about to be a killer. So it looks to me as if Stephen Solomon has found a forced win. If he hasn't, the computer will correct me. Nope. So Stephen is beating young Daniel Probrobowski from Melbourne. Stephen Solomon, the person who's won the most Gold Coast Open titles, and is definitely headed for a win here. So that hasn't started terribly well, but that will move him up to 3 points, which at least is in striking range of the leaders. And talking of the leaders, let's go to board 1 again, where Bobby Cheng has played f4, and the move order by him is a little bit curious, but I guess he knows what he's doing. f4, f6 was played. Take, take. Now, instead of knight c1, followed by knight d3, he starts with rook here. King e7. So, if knight c1 here, black will play rook f8 first and then put the king on d6. So I don't really see why you wanted to play rook f1 first, because rook f8 can happen anytime. And if you're not careful, you can easily be worse in some of these knight versus bishop endings, where black's king starts walking in. So you need your knight on a better square than e2. e2 is a bit of a shocker. So knight g1 is also possible. King d6, knight f3, and the idea is knight g5 at some embarrassing moment. May not be that bad. But also doesn't look so scary. So I'm not sure what Cheng has in mind, and the computer is saying knight g1 is better. Why? Knight g1, rook, let's say this rook f8, knight f3, king d6, knight g5, bishop e8, knight e6. Okay, you might get an f-file. So they're saying this is better for white. All right, I can accept that. So instead of knight c1 to d3, he wants knight g1 to f3. By the way, after knight g1, bishop g4, h3 just knocks the bishop back again, because you can't go to h5 because of g4 winning the bishop. So bishop g4 is pretty pointless to stop the knight going to f3. Do we have a move yet? Because you wouldn't expect him to muck around. Cheng's used a lot of time over the last few moves. Knight g1 played. So that is definitely going okay. I'll just add that knight g1 and move on to not the Solomon game, because that is more or less all over, I would say. Let's just check. Oh, let's go to a game we haven't looked at yet, and that's board 10. This is Byron Morris against Jackie Lee. So a couple of juniors, one from Queensland, one from Victoria, battling it out. Lee is the high-rated player. Let's see how it started. A French defense, advanced variation with bishop d3. Takes, takes, bishop d7. Is white about to give away that pawn? No, bishop e2. So it should be a very decent position for white, but because black has swapped, there is this possibility of knight c3 and knight a4 knocking the queen away. So b3 now. Check. Presumably king f1. Yep. And knight f5. Bishop b2. Well, that's another way to do it. The bishop on b4 is certainly not there permanently. So h5 stops g4. g3 gives the king a square. Knight a5. Where is that knight going? Oh, nowhere, but he wants to play bishop b5. Oh, that makes sense. Oh, sorry, he didn't do it immediately. Rook c8 first. So, can white go knight c3? Probably not, because of knight c takes d4. So, next question, do we go a3, h3? This is very slow. Knight a5. Okay, bishop b5 is going to be a bonus. King g2, bishop b5 takes. At least white can... No, white can't even develop quickly here. Knight a3, not the world's greatest square. Is he really going to go knight c2? Queen b6, sorry. So queen d3 played. I'm not sure I completely understand some of these moves. Knight c6, knight c2. White has at least protected the pawn on d4 quite well, and maybe one day g4 will be good. But white decides to change plan. So g4, knight h4 check will come. You expect that, and then you're meant to swap and go f4 and try and get f5 and try and win that way. Instead, white changes plan. Rook d1, I don't even see why that's necessary. And king d7. So, bishop a3 is interesting. Bishop takes, knight takes. Now that knight is stupidly placed. Maybe it's only temporary. But white does want in some positions to play, after knight c2, to play knight g5 and drag the black king back towards the f7 pawn. But it feels to me as if knight b4 is going to be very nasty. Queen d2, then queen a5. Queen b5 check looks really artificial. Knight b4 played. Queen e2 and now queen a5. Well, I'm afraid you don't have a lot of choice about queen b5 check now. So you have a truly horrible knight on a3. And Jackie Lee is doing very, very well here, I think. So you don't want to go knight b1. Apart from rook c2 and then doubling rooks, there must be other things too. No clock times, unfortunately. So I don't think you've got a big choice here. If knight b5, a6 looks good. You can't go knight c2 because the rook controls it. And rook queen here. You don't have a good square. To be honest, even rook c2 might have been good, but I like leaving that knight absolutely stranded. Now, white has trouble even controlling the c-file because the a2 pawn is going to be weak all the time. So I guess you could play rook d2 and just say, okay, well, I don't care, but it's black's move already. So is g4 coming at some point? Maybe. Whether it does too much damage, I don't know. So I wonder how black makes progress here. Everything's well posted, but I wonder if you should just do this. I know it's swapping off a really badly placed knight. Oh no, I could swap and take on d4. You can't even do that. So knight e3 check is threatened. Here, take. Feels very, very nice for black, probably winning. So I think, yeah, if queen b5 check doesn't work, then Byron Morris is in all sorts of bother. And Jackie Lee, who is only 16 but is already the 15th seed, looks like he's doing extremely well. So Byron Morris, by the way, is 17 and been very successful up in Queensland, but I can't see him surviving this. Oh, queen b2 played. Didn't imagine that. Rook c6. So Is there a threat of rook a6 or not? Probably not. So what about rook c1? Doubles rooks. But after you swap, you won't be able to oppose on the c-file again because you lose your a-pawn. Yeah, so it's getting really tough. The a2 pawn's a bit weak, the a3 knight's weak. And to use your queen to defend a knight like that is just sad. I'd be looking at something like knight c4 and d5 and trying to break out, but it's unlikely to work, and it definitely doesn't work in this position. So that's the board 10 game, and there's one other I haven't had a look at, and that is Ben Leong against Andrei Bukhaev. And Leong very wisely plays d4, avoiding the line of the Petrov that Bukhaev won with earlier, e4, e5, knight f3, knight f6, knight takes pawn, not losing at all. Well, but still not great. So, here we go. Lots and lots have happened. And, yeah. Okay, so it's a funny sort of Benoni. d6, e4, bishop g7. So what setup is white going to do? a4 knights. Okay. Castles, knight f3, e6. We're going into a main line of a four pawns King's Indian or a regular Benoni. Bishop d3 takes with c pawn, I presume. Yep, rook e8. And okay, in this position, there is a lot of choice. b5 is a respectable move here for black. There is bishop g4. Rook e8 is not supposed to be very scary. c4 is okay, but you should be able to drop back to c2. He didn't. Takes. So white is ahead in development. Whether he can do anything with it is a question, and he does have a small problem on the b2 pawn. So queen c2, rook e8, bishop d2, that doesn't look scary at all. So why not bishop f5? I guess bishop d3. Queen check played first, interesting. And then bishop f5. So bishop d3, takes, and Bukhaev isn't interested in grabbing on b2, but he will if provoked. So he wants knight c5 and knight e4 now, and that makes a lot of sense. So bishop c3, rook here looks, yeah, this is not going so well for white. Queen back, take, double rooks, I guess. White will have d4, black will have c5. Oh, he didn't double. He went queen c5 instead. So he wants to win the c3 pawn. I don't think that's that important at the moment. Queen here, knight b6. Now, maybe he wants to win the d5 one. That's getting more important. Rook ac1, queen d5. That looks like a whole pawn, and knight c4 is threatened. Rook fd1, queen c5 again. It does look as if Ben is down a pawn for nothing. Just 14 years old from Queensland, doing quite well. Things can happen, of course. Rook d4. No, not knight d4, rook d4. Doubles rooks. Now there's back rank mate ideas. So h3 was played. Rook here. Queen somewhere. Rook here. It is feeling horrible. The threat is rook takes knight. And then queen h5. Mating. Maybe white has to play queen d1? He didn't. He went knight g5. At least that stops a lot of the tricks. So queen f7 is threatened. If d5, I presume, well, black is absolutely fine because there's no c4. So if d5, we're threatening h6, and then our queen can't get across to the other side. Okay, that does make sense. So there's nothing really tricky here for black. You can, of course, defend, but there's no need. So I think he's just going to go d5, and he'll find another way for his queen to get back into the game, maybe queen c7 or queen e7. Most important thing is white cannot play c4 and break things open, at least not for a while. So it's just better for black. Bukraev is well on top and is headed for 2.5 points if he wins this one. So that's all 12 games. And Solomon has won, by the way. Okay, we had a few brief rallies, if you like. Where is Solomon? So Rook A1, he played, was it D5, I think, not D6. D5 takes Bishop D7, and White let himself get slightly distracted. Bishop here, Rook A2, Rook D8, and didn't even bother taking the knight for the moment, D7. So if B6, I suspect we can take on E6 and take on C6, but there's probably other things to do. In any case, Pobrajovsky didn't want to see any more and resigned. So Solomon, after a slow start, is up to 3 out of 4 and still very much in the hunt. That's our first result on the top boards. Stephen Solomon, 58 years old and still going strong. And let's see what. Well, he's done everything. He's won the Queensland Championship 4 times. He won the Queensland Open 4 times in a row, only from 2015 to 2018, just before the pandemic. 10 Olympiads. Finally Australian champion in 2008 after twice tying for first and losing the playoff. 7 Australian Masters title, and most Gold Coast Open titles, 5 I think. So he's really done everything, and he's still going. So a really impressive performance by him against someone who looked really good yesterday. So no reply from Kubakarov on knight G1. So that is interesting because okay, Rook F8. Where's Bobby's game gone? Cheng, there it is. Rook F8. I presume after knight F3, you haven't got time for H6. Have you got time for King F6? Gee, that looks risky. Really, really risky. The threat is Rook A8 and King G7, but something like Rook to the C file might be quite effective. So I don't think Cheng's going to muck about. Knight F3 played, King D6 played without mucking about. Okay, why isn't Knight G5 winning? Or nearly winning? King E7. Even here, knight takes pawn, Rook H8, Knight G5. Looks pretty good. But black is a little bit active. But do you have a choice? I don't think so. Knight G5, they also say King E3. So why is Knight G5 winning? What was I playing here? King E7. Knight takes, Rook here. Oh! Knight here, Rook takes. Check, King here. No. Just Rook G1. And apparently it's going to be very hard to guard all those remaining pawns. Rook F6 and the G6 is weak, and also Knight F3 might knock the rook away. So it seems to me that Knight G5 is close to winning a pawn. And Cheng surely will play it quickly. He did. So he must be way ahead on the clock. No, it's about equal. He spent ages and ages on F4. So that's really where his time went. Remembering this is seed 2 against seed 1. Bobby Cheng from Melbourne, 25-year-old, born in New Zealand, World Under-12 champion, against Timur Kubakarov, the reigning Australian champion, 21 years old, lives in Perth in Western Australia. This year's already won the Perth Open. He won the Ballarat Begonia Open. He came second in the Dobell Cup. He's in 2019, he won the Australian Masters, the Australian Open. 2020, he won the Australian Championship. So since coming to Australia, he's been fairly dominant and one sign that the pandemic's got to even him is 2 years ago when I asked him to coach at the National Junior Training Squad. He said that he was really wanting to spend any study time on himself. He wanted to use that time, not coach and help others, and that's a sign of an extremely ambitious player. And 2 years later, he did agree to talk about how he came from Uzbekistan, becoming a good player there. I think he beat Anand in a simultaneous exhibition when he was about 11 and maybe even 10, and then developed, had some problems with the federation, eventually moved first to Russia and then to Australia, and he's been very successful there, and he's able from Perth to relatively easily get to both Singapore and Malaysia and, of course, the Middle East as well. So he's not badly placed comparatively compared to most Australian players for playing internationally. There are a lot of big tournaments in the United Arab Emirates in particular, but also in Qatar. So Kubakarov's rating, though, has gone up slowly. His FIDE rating, he's probably playing at over 2,600, but it's still only 2,582. Again, relatively limited opportunities in the last few years, but it is noticeable that his Australian rating has already got up to 2729. Now, that is one of the highest ratings ever achieved by an Australian. I believe Julius Sachs did better than that. The Hungarian who won the Australian Open back in 1987. But certainly for an Australian player, that is, if not the record, then very, very close to it. But he's in a bit of trouble here. Oh, he played King E7, so he is allowing knight takes on H7. Okay, there is an improvement here. Where's Cheng gone again? So, you could swap first. Sorry, King E7 played. You could swap first here and then play rook here. And the difference is you don't have a rook g1 move after you've gone check here and king d6. Now, if white could remove the e5 pawn, white would have excellent winning chances with the two connected passed pawns. That doesn't seem so easy. The computer is saying this is not much. Yep, so this is in fact just about okay for black. I think it is okay for black. So that's what he's relying on after king e7. Do we have to take on h7? I would have thought so, but h3, wow. And if h6? Knight f3, knight h5, I don't know. Sorry, knight h4, yeah, that's what they're saying. So they are saying that h3, which is a really hard move to find, is better. Bobby Cheng is good at this sort of obscure little move, but he certainly hasn't done it yet, and he's got enough time. He's got half an hour. So the battle of the top seeds is definitely going better for Bobby Cheng. Let's just go back to the board 2 game, because we left it here after knight d2, and quite a bit's happened. So rook d8 played, queen g3. Now we're looking at knight e4 and bishop g5 at any particular moment. Queen g7, and now queen c7, which looks a bit weird. But it does protect c3, I guess the question would be what happens if bishop f6, and the answer is knight e4 because you need your bishop to protect your rook. So that's probably nothing special. How do you develop? And again, here if you move your bishop to d7, there'll always be queen takes on b7. So that is very tricky. Queen f8 played. At least the rook is overprotected. Bishop d6 is coming. So knight e4 played. Well, you really don't want to play f5. After f5, I would expect knight g5, bishop b3, queen c4. All these moves are possible. And you have a very big problem on the e6 square, if not the e6 pawn. So getting rid of the knight that way doesn't seem to work too well. Knight f6 looks like a decent way to try to remove that knight. The difficulty will again be bishop g5. So let's see, knight f6. Gee, I'd love to play queen takes bishop and bishop g5, but I guess I shouldn't. So let's go bishop g5 anyway. Rook d7. And then knight takes knight, and then the pressure's off a bit. What about bishop h6 here? That looks like it's winning material. In fact, it is. So I wouldn't be surprised if black's just about run out of moves here. If you play b6, we're just going to throw a6 in and you still can't move. Yeah, so bishop h6 at the right moment is going to be very, very annoying. I think McClymont's in all sorts of bother. Now, one thing about Brodie McClymont is that sometimes after losing a game, he drops his bundle. So he can disappear from the standings, but in recent times, he has really toughened up in that part of his game. So, mind you, he's been very successful, so he hasn't lost that many games in 2022. But certainly, it's only round 4. He's on 3 out of 3 already. To drop to 3 out of 4 is no great disaster. But, of course, the style of doing it without getting any chance at all is a bit of a worry. So right now, I don't see a threat for white. So that's something black can be happy about. I presume I can just go bishop e3 or some square like that and other rook d1 and just build up the pressure, but it's not game over. It certainly is a problem, though. h6 looks terrible. The idea would be to play f5 without knight g5, but I still don't like it. So yeah, I think, I think the computer's going to say +2. +2 and a bit. And if they say f5's the best move, then that is very, very sad. Yeah. They're giving moves like h5 for black. Well, yuck. And just saying bishop e3 and white is much better, and I have to agree with that. Just a reminder that if you've got any comments or questions, you can always throw them in the Twitch chat box, though you have to be watching, I think, via Twitch rather than the official website to do that. Okay, that is Brodie in big trouble, and Timur probably squirming out. Xiaozheng won against Jayden Oy. So Jayden Oy's knights have got themselves into a little bit of a mess. Maybe it's not fatal. Here, knight c6 was played, allowing pawn takes pawn. I presume knight d4 will be played. Yep. And now knight c4. So right now, if white takes pawn on a4, black takes pawn on e2 with check. That's probably a decent trade for black, and if white plays e3, the knight will jump in on b3. So knight c4 and rook takes played. If you take with the queen, d6 is hanging. So he played knight b6. I guess he really wants that a pawn. Queen here. And is he really going to play knight takes a4 and allow knight takes e2 check? Maybe he will. It's not game over or anything. And he has. Knight takes a4. So right now, white is a pawn up. You have to take on e2, I would say. Oh, d6 is hanging. Hang on. If you play here, take, knight takes. That is not what Zhao would want. Not what anyone would want. So, knight takes a4, so maybe he's not going to take on a2. But this is not the world's greatest Benko gambit. And of course, d6 is threatened. So that makes me think maybe d5 will be played. And yet, after knight e3, then e4. Yeah, there's a bit of activity here. But knight c3. Everything has a problem. And knight c3 is coming anyway, so d5 doesn't work too well. So has Jay Noi calculated this well? I think so. They say d5 is okay. Alright, why? A trick. Winning a piece. And they're saying f4 knight c3. Clever. Still unclear, but clever. So Zhao has his problems. Still no move. And I suspect he wanted to go knight e2 and he's realised too late it's not possible. Jack Puccini against Sravan Renjith. Whoa, this looks like a real Puccini attack. Where did we leave it? Opposite bishops. Me saying it was probably going to be a draw. Right, so Queen e4 played. G6. And now Queen G4. Now that is a nice move. He's forgetting about his pawn on F2. He wants Queen E6 check. So, did he take on F2? No. Queen D8. And here we go. Take. 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 King here. It'll have to be a Rook D3 sometime. No. Rook H3. Okay, Rook F6. We give a check. You run away. Another check. You run away. Genuinely not mate here. Rook DD3. So he doesn't want the king running to E6, I guess. So white has a perpetual, I think. Queen H8, Queen H5, Queen G4 if necessary. So Rook DD3. If you really want to go to F3, then black can play E4. Though maybe you lose that pawn. He did play E4. Queen H7. King E8. Okay, so the king's going on a runner. To D7 and C7 if it can. White at the moment has only 2 pawns, a third if you take e4. None of those pawns look especially dangerous. So for Pacini, he's got to decide, does he throw rook g8 check in? Because if he can, then he might delay the king coming across. So rook g8 check, let's say rook back, and perhaps we take. So if king takes or bishop takes, you don't have a quick king d7. I don't know if rook going to g3 is fast enough. Let's say bishop takes, and I would love to take on e4, but queen e7 looks fine. And I don't have time to take on b7 either. Rook d4, d5, queen b7 doesn't look anything terrific, so I don't think I've gained enough out of this. And if I had to put a computer guess, I would say 0.00. No, they like queen e4. a3? I'd rather play rook d8 to be honest, but... And they say this is black tied up too much. Could be true. Well, it's a computer, it probably is true. But certainly it's not quite trivial. He did play rook g8 check, okay. And my theory says that's going to be 0.0. No, they think black is better after bishop f8. Wow. That would be surprising. So Sravan Regis, the 14-year-old from Queensland, might just be given a chance. And of course for Pacini this is especially painful. Well, it's a game he had a perpetual check-in, so you always feel bad if something like that goes wrong. Back to Sardana. Still no... Oh, sorry. Wrong way around. Back to Sardana this way. He did play f5. Okay, do we believe this at all? Let's have a look. So f5 played, knight g5, bishop d6, queen c4, knight e5, queen a2. Isn't e6 a disaster? Rook e8. So bishop b3 looks fantastic. Maybe it allows knight d3. f4 is interesting. It does give away a lot of squares though. Even knight f7 might be possible then. So bishop b3, knight d3, knight e6. Yeah, it's not quite game over. I mean, it should be. I'm sure the computer will find something here. Bishop f4, which I wouldn't have thought of. Bishop b3. Okay. They like bishop b3. No, they don't like it as much. Bishop f4 looks super weird. Bishop a4 is interesting. Bishop f4, bishop a4, rook e7, queen e2. So none of this is obvious stuff at all. This is computer finding some forcing line that does well, but in practical terms, Brody has forced his opponent to actually calculate some tricky lines. And f4 creates some weaknesses. Bishop b3, knight d3 is messy. So none of this is as easy as White would like. That's probably why bishop f4 is so attractive, because maybe it obliges knight f3 check, and the resulting position could be very, very good for White after knight takes, bishop f4, bishop b3. That could just be some Capablanca style position where you've got total control over the e6 pawn. So Sardana's still doing well, but as I say, it's just that bit messy. Okay, let's try again. Anything from Cheng. h3, h5. That does look desperation to me, but okay. h3 played, which is excellent. h5. So, how does white make progress here? King e3 doesn't look bad, but there's a risk that if a rook goes to the c-file, there might be a problem. What about knight f3? King d6, knight h4. g5's playable though, unfortunately. So I don't see a knockout blow at all. Kubakarov is definitely just hanging on. Okay. Yeah, let's go back to Leong and Bukreyev, because that was one where I thought black might be crashing through. It's board 11, but in fact a lot of pieces have come off the board, and black has only a pawn up. So d5 was played by Bukreyev. Where's Leong? Oh. So d5 played, stop queen f7, and then white played knight f3. And that is very sensible. It's simply saying, well, you don't have queen h5 anymore, so I'm not getting mated after rook f3. And that is true. So, queen e7, knight g1, rook e1. I normally would not recommend swapping pieces off when you're doing well. So the other rook comes back to d1 probably, or did he take? He took first. Take, rook d1. And black's a pawn up, but only a pawn up. So the attack on the king is basically gone. Queen here, knight here, knight c4. Obviously this is... Oh, hang on. Was it knight c4? No, it wasn't. Knight e2, queen e4. In order to play knight c4 without losing d5. Seems reasonable. Although maybe e2 was hanging anyway. King here, now knight c4. And what can white do? Not too much. Knight g3. Personally, I'd hang on to my d5 pawn, but this could be winning. So knight e3 perhaps, with knight f5 threatened. Queen f3. You can also play queen d8, queen d4, but you're liable to have a bit of a problem. Let's see, knight e3 and queen f3 played. Well, that does stop some of the problems. Take, and he's clearly better. But is he winning? Knight here, knight e2, b5. That's sensible, though you're not going to win it on the queen side, so you have to create a mobile pass pawn on the other flank. King g3, f5 looks weird because white can go h4 and f4 and f4 first. King f7, that makes sense. King e7. Why he doesn't play a6, I don't know. h4, and now a dreadful move, h5. Wow. I know. So you've just ruined your own pawn structure. So, Bukreyev, you'd think an old player would be able to play endgames, but I'm not so sure about this. So young Benjamin Leong has extremely good drawing chances now. The object is probably, well, it's still tricky to activate your king. So maybe he's relying on getting his king to c4 before his opponent can do anything. Because the white knight, would love to go to e5 or somewhere like that. But at the moment, c3 is very weak and f4 is very weak. So maybe this is not so bad. I bet you the computer's going to say -3. -6, okay. I take it back, Andre. You're doing well. Okay, let's go back to one game. I believe we've got a bit of a sensation on our hands on board 4. So let's find it. There it was. Jaden Oy Zhaozong won. And remember, Oy has just stolen a pawn, but d5 still looked like it's pretty decent. Where is it? Where is Zhao gone? Board 3's disappeared. Fascinating. Okay. Okay, so I might go to an ad while I try to find out what is going wrong. So here we have a new PlayStation chess ad. So I must admit I had a lot of games like that in my career. So if I refresh, I wonder if I'll get board 3 back. I doubt it. No, it's oh yes, it's there, and we have some more moves, which let's see. I want to go back to Jaden. Everything's going wrong. Okay, so we left it with knight a4 or move 22. Where are we? So d5 played. Knight c3. That is a bit surprising. So it takes. I presume he took the rook, but who knows? Knight takes, knight takes. Pawn takes, and where does the knight go? Probably back. Although there is an e3 move if you go back here. Oh, sorry, he didn't go back. He took on c4. So let's judge this. This is 2 pieces for a rook and 1 pawn. But there is bishop d5 check to get rid of it. But black's king's pretty safe. The knight could go to d4 sometime. You'd have to say this feels like black should be better. So take is logical. King would presumably run away. Maybe c5 is a little bit weak. E3 first, so stopping knight d4. Is that knight on b5 stuck a bit, though? I'm thinking rook c1, rook c8, a4 or something like that. Rook f d1, rook c8 played. And did he play a4? Queen e6. Okay. So the rook is under attack. And the move played extraordinarily was c4. And that is truly, truly horrible. So queen takes c8, blundered a rook by the Grandmaster, and Jayden Oi, 12 years old, has won against Zhao Zhongwan, the third seed. And that pretty well puts an end to Zhao's chances of winning this tournament. He would have to win every remaining game, I would say, to have any hope at all. It also ruins anyone's chance of a Grandmaster, Norm, because you've got to play 3 Grandmasters, and Zhao Zhongwan's not liable to be up the top for a while. But, yeah, this is absolutely shocking. In the position where Queen e6 was played, okay, Rook d7 is threatened to some extent. Maybe White has enough initiative here. They think White is better after Rook c7, Rook d8, h5. Perhaps. I don't think Rook c8 was a great move. h5 was better. Yeah, the Rook's not perfect on c8. I think he was expecting Rook c1. Actually, Queen c6 was probably all right. Okay, so in fact the position was quite okay for White. In fact, slightly better for White by now. So knight c3 was not a bad decision. Knight e3 instead, followed by knight c3 was interesting, but we found some tactical lines. But certainly this was a relatively simple way of playing. You get to play bishop d4 check, d5 check, so there's not a lot of minor pieces running around your king. And then you try to put your rooks on the central files. I wonder if e4 is even a little bit slow. But the knight on b5 is surprisingly poorly placed. It needs to get back into the game. Maybe it should be going straight back to c7. But even from there, it just doesn't have access to e4. It needs... Maybe we need queen b6 and knight d6, e4 or something like that. But that's all very slow. In any case, it's all over. Yeah, Jayden Oi from Queensland, 1/3 the age of Coffs Harbour's Zhao Zhongwan, has got the biggest scalp of his career, and I hope that David Smurden, Zhao Zhongwan's longtime friend and rival, is getting a little bit of satisfaction out of watching his charge do so well, and probably also feels a little bit sorry for Zhongwan. I've got to save this. Oh, sorry. I've got to save it and put 1-0 in. So that is what's that doing? That is a very, very big result. We've had a few more. Jack Piccini against Sravan Renjith. We mentioned that we thought that Piccini was ruining a good attack. He went to Rook g8 and he played Rook f8 rather than Bishop f8. Okay. Rook takes. Bishop takes, I presume. And does he start checking or what? Queen takes check, king d7, a3. So he's got his 3 pawns. Black's king's pretty safe though. Queen e7, check, check. And you don't really want to play king c8 and block your rook in. If you play bishop e7, then, and maybe that's the best, but then rook e3, you are a bit tied up. So he decided to just make a draw. Don't know how many times they repeated. Just a few more. And another good result for a Queensland junior. This time Sravan Renjith, who draws with Jack Piccini, the 6th seed. And Renjith is 14. And also seeded number 11, so it's not such a surprise. But Piccini with white is terribly dangerous, as he showed in this game, but somehow Renjith held on. I wish this one would go away. That's better. So that's it for that game, and we have another result, and that is we knew Stephen Solomon had already won. He won very, very quickly. So we've got 3 results on the top 5 boards already. However, board 1 is as hard fought as ever. And it looks to me like those 2 have drawn. Unfortunately, on board 1, the top 2 seeds, Bobby Cheng couldn't find anything better than knight here, king d6, knight here, king d6, and is it move 27? So knight g5 would be repeating position. I know Cheng's gained some time. They're both down to about 20 minutes. That's not serious. Well, unless you're playing knight h4, which I don't completely believe, then I don't see what you're going to do. Knight h4, maybe g5, knight g6 is not so clear. Because if you have to give up the f file, then we get rook f6 check in. And e5 could be quite weak. So I wouldn't be totally surprised if knight h4 came. But you've got to be pretty brave, especially with not a lot of time. Remembering there's no second time control here. It's 90 minutes plus 30 seconds of move, nothing else. So knight here, g5. Knight g6. They think this is really good. In fact, they think it's so good that you've got to go rook f4, which cannot possibly be great. But okay. So knight h4 is very decent. Will Cheng play it? This is where we're at. No, he's just gone 28 knight g5. So Kubakarov will claim a draw, and this game on board 1 is over. These 2 people will be leading the tournament on 3.5 out of 4. Brodie McClimate, in the unlikely event that he wins, could overtake them, but they've got one of the grandmasters out of the way, and yeah. So yes. Yep, so we just had a few comments on Xiaozong Wan's horrible blunder. Yeah, it's certainly extraordinary. He didn't look great yesterday with his 2 draws, but you still don't expect a player who's so good at blitz to just give away a rook like that. But yep, people do it. I've been spending the last couple of years looking at examples where people resign games where they could win or draw. So a simple rook blunder is nothing compared to that sort of fatal decision. Okay, so that one's over. Have they marked it up yet for a draw? Not yet, but they... Oh, he kept going. No, my apologies. That is extraordinary. If Kubakarov is trying to provoke his opponent into doing something different, that is absolutely extraordinary. But yeah, he is... so far playing on, but maybe he just couldn't be bothered claiming a draw. So let's go to board 2, where Rishi Sardana is getting a little bit of pushback from Brodie McClimate. It still feels like a pretty horrible position, but let's see what's happened here. Where's the Rishi Sardana game? So after rook e8, he played f4, knight f7, and knight f3. So he's just hoping, okay, if he doesn't get e5 in, then he's going to be at least a bit better. Mind you, that bishop might come out to d7 one day. So bishop d7 played, bishop b3, making sure it doesn't go to c6, queen g7, bishop here, bishop d2, and queen f6. So is he thinking about e5, or is he just... No, he's just thinking about bishop c6 at some point. The queen on f6 looks rather unstable. It feels to me as if there might be bishop e3, bishop d4, for example. So I'm not sure that I want my queen on f6. What's the clock times in this game? 15 minutes to 9, so McClimate is behind on the clock, and a nice quiet move by White. I like that. He just wants to double rooks and make sure e5 never happens. He can reposition his bishop later if he wants to. Once he's doubled on the e-file, his queen might have more options as well. Yeah, you don't have bishop b5 here. So that is a real problem. So Sardana's decided just to keep control. So let's go, just quickly check. Have they agreed to draw? They have now. Were there any more moves? No, king e7 agreed drawn. So there's only one game of the top 5 still going, and it is definitely going the way of the 4th seed Rishi Sardana. A lot of you may not have heard of Sardana. He was born in Canberra, and his parents went back to India quite soon afterwards. But at a relatively young age, he changed to play for Australia, even though he stayed living in Delhi. He came back as an early teen, I think, to play some Dobell Cups or some tournaments like that. But he played very little in Australia. But he represented Australia at the World Junior Championships, for example. He was basically professional from about 2014 to 2019, and the pandemic came. He decided he had to get some other job because chess wasn't paying the bills, so he studied data analytics, I think, and took a job in Delhi and then got himself transferred to Canberra. Suddenly all the restrictions started getting lifted, and he's played a lot of tournaments since then. In fact, I think he might be the only guy only top player who's played Ballarat, Dobell, and the Gold Coast Open, the Triple Crown of Australian weekend tournaments. He came 3rd in the Dobell Cup, I believe. But his previous tournament before he started playing in Australia was Gibraltar in very early 2020, the Gibraltar Open, and then everything shut down. And that was the end of his professional chess career. Now he's a semi-professional player. And remember, he's done all this and he's still only aged 24. So he's probably more professional than a lot of the Australian players. So black is doubling here. That gives bishop e3 extra punch if you can play it, because a7 will be hanging. And the idea of bishop e3 is bishop d4. But at the moment, bishop e3, you can probably take on c3, which you don't really want. There is c4, c5 here if we want to do it. I'm not sure we do. Anyway, plenty of time. He's got twice as much time as his opponent. So Rishi Sardana will be fine. Okay, let's go back to Aidan Brady and Yi Lu, because we left that quite early on, actually. This is over. And where's Brady's game? It doesn't appear to be here at the moment. So we left it as a French defense, black very comfortable, but nothing much going on. So knight d4, castles, and white has to develop one day. Oh, I've got the wrong game. Maybe it wasn't knight d4 castles. I don't know how that happened. Still got the wrong game. Please. Yes. Okay, knight d4 castles. Bishop b5, a little bit weird. Queen b6. So he really wants to take with the pawn, not a bishop, and get his bishop on a6 later. But in fact, after white castled, he thought, okay, bishop d7, it's the only way I'm going to get it developed. And that's absolutely fine. Bishop e2, rook fc8. Black's really going smoothly. The only downside from black's position is the queen on b6. You really want to be able to push the b pawn, so that's not ideal. But it's still a very good French-style position. So h4, queen returns to a5. It was there before. We're getting ready for b5, even as a pawn sack. I would think h5 would be good, but okay. King b1, a6, and now f5. If you can get f6, then black's pieces are terribly offside. If you take on d5, the danger is the d5 pawn falls. But instead, but he did take here, because after knight d5 he can swap queens, and that reduces a lot of the attack. Now if you take on e5, knight e7 check is good, but you could probably start with rook e8 to avoid trouble. No, he started with knight e4. Knight to f2, knight e7, so rook e8 first. Now black's got a lot of threats. So e5 is weak, f2 is weak. You've got a problem. Tried knight b6, bishop e6. e5 is still weak, and f2 is still weak. So rook hf1. Knight g3. This all looks very, very nice for black now. Rook e1. Knight takes. Are we really going to allow bishop takes a6? No. Bishop a6 doesn't work because after pawn takes, we're threatening the knight on b6, and also after pawn takes rook e5, we've got bishop a2 check and rook takes e5. So he tried bishop f3, take. His main idea is if he's a pawn down, at least it's a bad bishop on e6. f4 played, and now knight takes e6. And this is very practical chess. He wants to pair of rooks to come off to be able to go rook d7 and try and get some counterplay. In the meantime, I'm very worried that black knight will go to f5 and h4 and f3 and get rid of a lot of pawns. But it looks to me like white is banking on having enough counterplay along the 7th rank. Frankly, it's a little bit unlikely, but so I think rook takes e6 is simply good. But we shall see. So Yi Lu's looking like he's heading for perhaps his first win against Aidan Brady, at least the first one I know of. He's had one loss and a series of draws. So, well, we'll wait and see. Oh, he must have taken back by now. Yes, he took with a rook. And black is a very, very safe pawn up. Knight d7. So you can't go rook d8, but you could certainly go rook e8 if you wanted to. And that looks like a good square, because knight c5, I don't care about b7. I'd rather go e5, e4, and after takes f3. And that's going to be close to winning. So unless there's a better idea like rook c8 to stop knight c5, which might allow rook d4. Rook d4 looks just slightly annoying. Yeah, it's. I was actually thinking of some rook d8 and trying to win with the three with connected pawns, but it's a bit early for that. So Aidan Brady is looking like he's headed for his first loss. He's had a really good tournament, although in retrospect, drawing with Xiao Zhongwan doesn't look as good as beating him, but, well, drawing with the Grandmasters, not too bad. So rook e8 played, and I think black will go on to win this game without too many difficulties. It also looks like white's clock is pretty bad. So instead of knight c5, he went knight e5. I don't mind that. It's trying to cut out counterplay, but, well, knight f5 looks annoying. And maybe black can do even better. There's ideas like playing h5 here, both to free up the king and to think about g5 followed by h4. That could be annoying. So I wonder if white's trying to play rook d4 here to get the pawn back. How much counterplay is there according to the computer? Not enough. Knight f5, h5, g5. Really? hg6, h5. Yes, of course. That's a quick way of getting a passed pawn. So it's interesting that black has to be fairly active to mobilize his pawns to make this all work. Anyway, let's move on to another game. So Dusan Stoic against Gene Nikauchi. We left that as a very strange hedgehoggy sort of position. Where are we going? Stoic after knight h7. I don't completely trust white's pawns, and yet black's put the pieces on rather strange squares. So rook f1 played. And finally, Nikauchi decides he has to fight back. In this sort of position, if white had time for f5, everything would be good. But unfortunately, after knight f5, you've got time to take on f4. Bishop takes, and now that knight has a good square. c4 is hanging. You don't really care if you lose d6. It's what happened, though. Oh, no. Takes, check. Oh, that is clever. Queen f2. So if queen takes knight, queen f7 check. Now, I'm not sure both sides are in control here. Black would like to play queen g3 and knight f4, but I'm a little bit nervous that white will just go e5. So knight f4 immediately. Rook cd1, check. King runs away. Not exactly sure where. h1, okay. So rook a b8. So if queen f7, there is a rook f8 move. What about taking e6? He didn't want to. He went to d7, rook f8, and I don't think Nikauchi's got enough for his pawns. They're great knights, but, well, one of them is. The other one has potential. It's a knight with potential. So knight g5, and then you can come to e6 and so on. h4, knight here. Queen takes, pawn takes. This is about the best you can do. One knight on d4, one knight on f4. It won't be enough. b3, knight d4, and now rook f2, I think, was it? Rook. Oh, there is already a rook in f2. Queen takes, pawn takes. It wasn't b3. It was rook f2. Okay. So, rook f2, g5, take. b3, knight d4, rook up. And at some point, white will be able to go knight d5. Now, black's king would love to finish up on e5. Maybe it's not easy to win, but it's much better for Dusan Stoic. So yeah, king g7. And I think at some point swapping one of those knights off is going to lead to something pretty good. Let's say the other possibility is if black's rooks leaves the b file, maybe we have a b4 move. But yeah, black's king is definitely going super active, and white's bishop's not so good. I'm not so sure anymore. This could be 2 pawns worth of compensation. Knight a4. That's nasty. If you protect with the rook, we just take anyway. So we think Stoic is better, and he's got much more time. Any news in? Whoa, yeah. This looks like time trouble in the Rishi Sardana game, and you have to say black's pieces are stepping on each other's toes, really badly here. So c4 was played here. Oh, rook e2, sorry, rook e7, doubles, then c4. One day bishop c3 will come. b6, ignore it. Queen c2. Black just can't play e5, so the whole position's dodgy. Bishop c3, otherwise the queen would be trapped. Queen runs away. Queen d2. Bishop c7. Is there any reason why queen d4 isn't winning? Yeah, probably knight f7 hangs on. That's probably true. Oh, there is knight e5 then. Oh, not really. Knight g5 then? Probably not for sure either. So Sadan has got a good chance to analyse all this. I wouldn't be surprised if Queen d4 is winning, but they're saying take, knight e5, bishop takes, rook takes. Oh, bishop takes. Wow. So they think white's just positionally crushing, and it's you can choose your ways of getting through. So I wouldn't be so sure in a real game, but it's certainly looking pretty good. So Fred Litchfield against Mars Chi, and that has gone a long way since we left it with this funny pawn structure. And it's still a funny pawn structure, but Black's knight, instead of landing on e4, has landed on b5. So Queen d3, knight f6, rook f d1. I guess he wants a bishop on e1 if he has to. Rook e8, and he in fact put it on e1 out of the range of that knight, so that one day he'll have f3 when he needs it. So Black won't jump in for a while. Bishop f8, and now a really ambitious move, c5. So part of the idea would be to, if the pawn wasn't on b3, you could think about playing rook c3, rook a3. As it is, it looks to me like you're going to have to look at playing a4, rook b1, and b4, and opening up over there. Once again, it just jumps to another game. Very weirdly. And that is not sorry. The game somehow that is Kelvin Fink, and yet it says Litchfield. So I'm going to have to. Oh, is it about to adjust? It's about to adjust. Very weird. I don't quite understand that. And this is a totally different position again than the one we had before. And it's the wrong position. All right. So Queen e7, g3, knight e4. So you can't get rid of it for a while. It's true. Rook c2, rook e b8. And that's clever. He wants to play b6 before his opponent can play a4, b4. f3, knight f6, king f2. Hope he knows what he's doing here. He needs to be able to protect that pawn a lot. b5, take. And of course with your king on f2, Black's more likely to open up. So rook c5. a4. If you're going to lose a pawn, you don't want to... it's not even losing a pawn, is it? Take. Rook b5, bishop back, I suppose. No, b4 played. That is risky. He wants to win that pawn on a4. So he's threatening queen c2, I guess. Huh? So he didn't go rook b5. He went rook b8. That makes a lot more sense. Did he play b4 here? He did. And now rook e8. So suddenly the queen is completely tied down to that pawn. So you can't go queen c2 and take the pawn. Rook here. You need another protector because there's no way you want to go f4. Finally, is bishop d1 coming, is the question. Queen d6. Queen d2. And all of a sudden, rook e3. Is that really working? f4. What an idea. So if pawn takes, queen takes, and we're threatening queen h2 and if you move your king to protect the h-pawn, then queen e3, that is absolutely magnificent. So in the end, he played check and g4, and he's in all sorts of bother. So Mars Chi is doing okay. Knight c7 I like. Well, you got a big choice. Do you take and go opposite bishops? No, your d-pawn will be lost very, very quickly. So bishop here is trying to hang on. Knight b5, bishop d1. Did he go a3 or did he bother with something else? Knight a3. He wants knight c4. Okay, so bishop c5. Is it worth playing knight c4? Probably not. Why is the a-pawn not falling now? Or is there a big possibility of queen f6 here? And if you go pawn grabbing, we go check. Don't know exactly where to put the king and knight c4. Oh, we're still alive. We could have delayed the check, I guess, and played knight c4. But it's not mate. And white is threatening a few things. So that knight a3 is tricky, but I don't think it's working terribly well. Have we got clock times in this game? We have. White has 40 seconds left, plus increment. So queen d8 played. Well, that's a funny way to go to h4, but you should just take on to h4, but you should just take on a4. And you're still alive. Part of it is that bishop on h6 is just not working at the moment. Sure, it's a great square for the black knight to land on e3, but as long as it's not mate, I don't really mind. So, very, very messy. But Mars Chi has blown a really, really good position by trying to be tricky. Yeah, he could have just played a3 here. Then bishop g7, then queen f6. Maybe put your queen on h4 and play h5 and improve your pawn structure. Yeah, d4 is very weak. White may have to take that knight, and then you've just got a bad bishop. It's even if you win the a3 pawn, you've still got a really bad bishop. So I think this is an opportunity lost, although in time trouble, of course, anything can happen. Bishop takes a4, played by Litchfield. He's not scared. And we'll see how this one goes. So Litchfield, the higher ranked player, he is the 12th seed. Yeah, he looks like he may do okay against Mars C, who really who really should have made the most of his position. Let's go back to board 2 because that's the big game that's still unfinished. And if McClimate can win in the extremely unlikely event of McClimate winning, then he goes into the clear lead. McClimate, he must have seconds left. No, 2 minutes. He's kept 2 minutes on the clock. So a bit's happened since we left it. White did play queen d4. Knight f7 was the response. Now my original idea was knight g5, but I think knight takes is playable. And either you swap queens or you take on g5 with the queen, and that's not quite so clear. So he didn't go knight g5. What he did do was a little bit surprising. He went c5. So I'm not sure if he wants to disrupt things with c6 and then take on e6, because when he does take on e6, queen h8 becomes possible. So the reply was h6 in order to go to h7 very, very quickly. So, can he go c6 here? I suspect his opponent would immediately go bishop c8. And then if you take on a7, maybe we take on f4. And still a bit messy. But, okay, there is a queen f6 move here that looks really nasty. So let's have a look. And there is a 95. No, not 95. Okay, so queen f6, king here. Knight h4, queen here. Why isn't this falling apart? f4 is hanging, by the way, so I can't do absolutely anything. Gee, it's so close to a knockout. Queen f6, king h7, bishop takes e6 is of course good, but because f4's hanging, it's not absolutely decisive. Yeah, when the king's on h7, I want to checkmate with a rook h3, but I haven't quite got my pieces there yet. I love the fact I can just jump in on f6 for free, but that makes me think, what about here, knight g5 check? No, you can take with the knight. If pawn takes, I want rook e3, and to mate you, I probably... Well, I can't guarantee that I can, but I think I can. But that's not working either. So, Brodie McClymont is just hanging on. c6 played. And instantly, bishop takes. Really? If I didn't know better, I'd think rook e6 was game over. Rook takes. Rook takes, rook takes. Looks game over to me. He didn't want to go bishop c8, but he probably should have. So, okay, this is where Sardana can sit down and calculate it all out. I can just turn on the computer and it'll say rook e6 plus 8. Plus 9. There you go. So, yeah, it's absolutely game over. And Rishi Sardana will move up into the co-lead with both Timur Kubakarov and... who else have we got? Yeah, of course, Bobby Cheng. And is there anyone else on 2.5? No, nobody else on 2.5 that can go there. So there will be 3 leaders having dropped half a point. Has he taken? Yeah, rook e6. So I think McClymont will have to resign soon. Come on, take back with the rook. Yep, he has done. Well, you have to take that too. No, I think he might resign. The fact that he hasn't moved, he's got 2 minutes left. Okay, c6 is threatened, g6 is threatened. You don't have a choice about swapping, unless you're resigning. But after you swap, you can't stop queen h8 mate. Yeah, so it is really all over, and I think McClymont has resigned, but I can't confirm that just yet. Let's go down. I'll just refresh. That might tell me a bit more. That's board 1. That's not what I wanted. Yep, still no move. So that is McClymont will resign. And so, Rishi Sardana, who did drop 1 draw early on, I think, who was it to? Was it Aidan Brady, perhaps? Bit further down. No. Oh, yeah, round 1 maybe? No, it was round 2. And he was playing Jean Nicauchi, and he dropped a half to Jean Nicauchi. Never had any chances there, but he has looked pretty good in his other games. So let's go down to some of the bottom boards. We have a result on okay. This is this night ending. Okay, unfortunately, this program has a habit of turning things upside down. So we got the night ending around here. Oh, even worse. A6, A4, takes. 2 extra pawns for black, and he went on to win. So 14-year-old Ben Leong, will be a little bit disappointed with today's game, but certainly he's not looking completely outclassed in this field, I have to say. Okay, Jack Rogers had some sort of attack. Well, he doesn't anymore. So D4. So this is approximately where we left it. Where's Rogers again? There he is. So bishop e4, we want the knight to e4. Knight f8 played. So cd4, cd4. Do you take on b7 or not? Yes, he took, and pawn takes, and white is simply a pawn up. Decent position too. Rook ed8, knight f3, queen e4. This is about the best you can do, at least. Actually, knight f3 was good, but the white queen hasn't got back yet, which is a slight disadvantage. So queen g4, knight here, g3. It's just feeling that little bit loose. What about rook c1, c8? Yep, and with the white queen offside, black is probably okay here. I don't know if we want to go rook c1 and... No, but you're just... yeah, perhaps rook c1. If you take your two rooks for the queen, we can hide on h3. Maybe play f5, and otherwise we might swap on c8 and play d5, and that could be pretty dangerous too. White may not have got desperate enough. He didn't get desperate enough. He just went rook here. I guess he's hoping for queen h3, queen g2, but really it's not promising. So knight e7. We can come to f5, we can come to d5. Queen h3, I think. Knight f5, queen f1. No, you've got to take the queens off the board. To allow the major piece ending like this. Now, did he go queen c5 or did he take back? He went queen c5. And now it's a major piece ending, and one person's king is much worse than the other person's king, so it's always going to be good winning chances for black. Takes, queen f2. So you don't really want the queens off, so I would say queen d3 looks pretty sensible here. He played queen d5, I like that. b3, rook c3, and h5, h4 is going to be the problem sooner or later. Queen here, rook d3. Okay, so he's got a d-file. If you go, you could go queen e4, I suppose, whether it helps or not. Queen e4 he did play. He went queen c5. I'm thinking queen d7 makes more sense, but and if rook c1, I'll just go g6. I think my king's pretty safe. I might be wrong. Instead, he went queen c5 check, and now the king has a chance to run away. Check here. Rook e2. What's he trying for? Queen d1, I guess. Yep, king h3. And that king is reasonably safe. So there is a queen f1 check, but not doing too much damage. Still, black is better. Still, the king, his king is safer. Queen e2. And now, oh, he thinks he's made a draw. If queen b1, queen c2. Takes, and g5. Now, that is a common way of trying to win these endings. But here I would think king g4 makes a lot of sense. Maybe then king g6. You've still got problems. So g5 isolates the e-pawn. That's the idea. In fact, Carlsen's won games like this without even an extra pawn. So are you willing to go h4 around here? No, he went rook e4. So b5. If you go rook b4, we go rook d5 and force you back again. So h4 played. And I think you should just swap here, but he didn't want to allow rook f4 in. Not sure why. a5 takes rook d5. No, you don't give away a pawn if you're trying to win these endings. King f4 I'm not sure about. b4, rook e2. Now there's a rook d4 check. You could easily lose some of these pawn endings. King e3, rook g4 maybe. But while you're busy taking the g-pawn, or even the e-pawn as well, the a-pawn is probably going to fall. So I don't think Badruddin is playing this altogether well. He may be still absolutely okay, but because I'm not sure exactly what white's going to do here if black sits tight. But so rook check and rook d5 makes sense. But apart from that, yeah, it's probably not worse at all for white anymore. So he's going to hang on. So, all right, that one we've done. Let's go back to Rishi. He must, surely he's resigned by now. Sure has. And it was, oh, okay, he did play on a little bit. Take, king h7, bishop takes. I can't even, oh, is he going to go bishop d6? Okay, so he's got one swindle with bishop to c5. He avoided it, and now he has to resign, and he did. So Rishi Sardana is in the lead. 3 leaders: Sardana, Cheng, and Kubakarov, the 3 of the top 4 seeds. Unfortunately, seed number 3, Zhao Zhongwan, is sitting back on 50% after a shock loss to 12-year-old Jaden Oy, the Queenslander. So, what have we got left? Kelvin Fink has gone down. We left that one a while ago in an absolutely crazy position. If you recall, it was, oh, well, that you won't recall anything like that. This was what we left it at. Absolutely fantastic position. The computer keeps saying 0.00, which is also pretty amazing. So rook takes g2, and now rook f1. Hang on, doesn't it allow castling queenside, or has our king moved? You'd think you'd bother to check on h8 first, perhaps, but... So did he castle? He did indeed. Castles, ef7, rook takes. Okay, I like it. You can't take, but you can play king here. And now if we could somehow decoy the knight away, we could have queen c3 or... he did take on b2. And he checked with the bishop. Because we have queen b... No, we don't have queen b6 check, but we might have queen b7 check. King b1. So queen b7 check, knight b3. Bishop takes. Rook takes, rook check on d8 and queen. And it's white that's winning. Wow. But instead, bishop here played. What a move. This is a fantastic little combination. So my guess is you're going to have to go king c1 here. If you take with the knight, queen b7 is actually mate with checks. If you take with the king, I'm not completely sure, but bishop d4 looks pretty close to deadly. Yeah, bishop d4 I think is deadly. So you have to go king c1. And he did. Then came bishop takes here. Wow, so you don't have time to queen. You do have time for this check. Completely crazy. So if we run our king away, rook takes d4 is check. So we have to go this way. And does white have a perpetual check now? He didn't want a perpetual check. So queen b5, bishop b6, rook takes rook, and pawn equals queen is good for white. So queen b5 is a draw or not? I think it is. Instead, he went the unbelievably incredible queen d6. Really fantastic. But rook takes queen. He will take back with the pawn, and then he will make a queen. Can he play bishop takes rook? He did. Oops, I think he's miscalculated something here, or can he take on d1? So if he plays rook d1, bishop c5 wins. He's very unlucky here. So he miscalculated bishop d1. And so queen d6 is simply bad. Instead he played queen, and this of course is going to be pretty bad. Oh, sorry, he didn't take it immediately. Throws a check in first, just to knock the king away. Don't know where it went, b1 or b2, b2. Take, take. And now we've got a passed e-pawn that's pretty good. Check here, bishop here. So the e-pawn is just going to charge down the board. I don't think it can be stopped. e6. Oh, he went b1. And now with the bishop off the d-file, he can go king d6 and stop the pawn. So rook here, we just have to stay safe. There's no, there's no rook a6 check. We get that with check. Now king takes pawn, or a few more checks. Bishop d2, wow. The pawn is just rolling, absolutely rolling. Oh. And e2. Yep, and resigns. So a good win for Canberra's Michael Kethrow. Fantastic complications. It looks to me like that is a draw by perpetual. I don't know if the computer confirms that. It says king b8, queen d6. Rook takes d4 wins. Bishop d3. Oh my goodness, that is absolutely fantastic. Rook takes d4. Bishop d3 check. Queen c4. The computer is a genius. If bishop takes, I presume we just take here. And do I start with rook d7? No, I'll make it queen. And white just wins on material. Fantastic. But okay. So white was in fact winning with rook d4 followed by queen c4. He found one great queen sacrifice. He didn't find another one. So let's see if so. Someone's just indicated the Byron Morris game has turned around a little bit. Oh, sorry, that was. So that game is on board 10. Where did we leave it? We left it with black in total control after rook c6. Let's go further up. My goodness, there's been a lot of chess. So rook c6 was where we left it. So knight e1, doubles rooks. It's horrible. Rook d2, G6, I'm not sure that's necessary, but it should be okay. And Jackie Lee, the Melbourne junior, is doing fine. So G4 is a little bit desperate, but I can understand it. Now we could play knight H4 check and G5. He did. But he didn't play G5, which I think looks rather good. He went Rook C3 check. So if king takes, rook check, king G5, queen D8 is checkmate. So I guess you have to go F3. And that is what happened. And then he took. Whew. I don't think this was necessary. Rook C3 check. If you just play G5 and bring a rook to the H file and play knight G3, sorry, knight G6, knight F4, you must be doing really well. Knight D3. If queen B1 here, oh, the A3 knight hangs, so you have to take. So the question is, how does white hang on to all those knights? So rook F1 played, rook H8, he wants queen D8, but this is not convincing. Absolutely not convincing. So queen E2, already we're leaving our knight hanging, but if rook C3, knight B1 looks fine. So he tried queen A6, and we could get some endgame here if we're lucky. Knight B1 perhaps. Knight C2, rook C3. I think I'd swap. I don't have to, I could have played queen D2. But he swapped to knight B4, A5, knight A6, and he's got his knight to C5, and that is a good square. Rook C2, check, king E7, what about knight G5? A4 first. I guess everything's protected. Now we can play king F4 if we wish. This is not going so well. King G2, yuck. Check rook F2. Very often the best chance when you're playing with a rook against two knights is to get everything else off the board. Here I'm a little bit nervous about knight B7, knight A5. But I'm very tempted to swap and play F6 or something like that. Maybe it's just not good enough. Did he swap? No, I doubt it. Rook C1, knight here, rook HH1. That will not be perpetual, so I'm not worried at all. Check, king E8, yeah, rook F2, why not? E6 is so weak, so it feels as if white is just winning this one. Is he going to check? Yep. Oh, I don't know if he took with that knight. No, he took with the other knight. That's much safer. Now the king's on the edge. There's a small chance you'll have a problem, but I really doubt it. So G5, check, so he's going for another pawn. King D8, I guess. Is that what happened? Yep, knight takes. Check. Here, check. He has to block the F file, unfortunately. Otherwise he'd be winning. King here, king E3, and he has time to bring his piece back, I guess. But it's absolutely desperate. Oh, he goes for a few checks first. Active king should be winning. If rook takes d4, you've got king e6. Oh, he didn't play it. Oh, hang on. Is that black king somewhere? Have I missed a move? I have indeed. Oh. Rook. No, I haven't. King f3. Rook h4, king e3. Oh, he played king e8 here. And then rook g2, sorry. Apologies for that. Yeah, king e8 stopping rook f8 mate. Rook g2, he started checking. Knight check, you've got very limited squares for your king. But at least he's got a pawn back. g5 is falling, of course. So his only hope is to get 2 knights only by eliminating all the pawns. White needs an open file, probably the H file. Rook H2. Okay, only 1 pawn left. But it's got to be winning. Is that just knight, rook D7, rook check? Oh, he takes a rook. That should be easy. And game over. So Byron Morris does win. 1 year older than Jackie Lee at 17. And yeah, he took a terrible position. He just didn't do anything silly and waited for his opponent to just suicide. So that's a big win for Byron Morris, actually, because he was seeded way below Jackie Lee. 16th seed was Lee. So he moves up to 2.5 points. If he's not careful, he's going to be floating down to Zhao Zhongwan in the next round. Just repeating, Zhao Zhongwan has lost to 12-year-old Jaden Oy. Okay, I might... Oh, we're just about all over. Maybe we knew that. Yep, Mars Chi did win. Dusan Stojic won with the extra pawns. Okay, that wasn't so unexpected. Jack Rogers, we thought this was a drawn rook ending. But it's still... Yeah, it still should be drawn. I mean, a bit can happen, but it should be drawn. So, that leaves us after the 4th round of the Gold Coast Open, aka Australian Championship. We have 3 leaders. I'll go to standings even though they're not up to date. So we have Bobby Cheng, Timur Kubakarov and Rishi Sardana on 3.5 points. Brody McClymont is just behind on 3. Hang on, did I overlook a result here? Is it Yi won, I presume? Yeah, Yi did win. Okay, so Yi Lu is up on 3 points. Jack Puccini is also up on 3 points, as is Dusan Stojic. And Sreven Rengis. But, there were a lot of people on 2. But the big one is Jaden Oy, who has beaten the 3rd seed, Zhao Zhongwan. So Zhao Zhongwan's hopes of winning another Australian Championship or retaining his Gold Coast Open title, he was co-winner last year, are pretty well gone. And, well, that's... that he'll obviously try hard, but he's going to have to produce some absolute magic to stay in this tournament. He's only a 1.5 points off the lead. I guess it's possible, but really it's going to be very difficult. Bobby Cheng and Timur Kubakarov, since they don't have to play Zhao Zhongwan for quite a while, they'll be running through the International Masters next round. Well, Rishi will almost certainly be playing Kubakarov, and then you would expect Cheng. Well, if McClymont's unlucky, he's getting... Oh, no, he won't... yeah, if McClymont's unlucky, he's getting Cheng, but it could be anyone, Jack Puccini, or various other players, Yi Lu. So we'll see how that one goes. So all the best. The round starts at 3:30, so an hour and 20 minutes from now, and I'll be and I'll be doing the commentary from 4 o'clock. So thanks everyone for coming along, and I look forward to talking to you then. Bye.